All right. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. We still have a couple of watches that I want to talk about from Only Watch, but I want to start with something of a hot topic. I do want to wait until I Love Maldives arrives because he asked me um, about my opinion, about my perspective. And in fact, if I can talk about it from a number of different perspectives, I'm going to introduce the topic in a little bit, but it's basically in the most general way about pricing strategies for specifically independent makers and whether that should have any direct relationship any direct relation to how these watches trade for on the secondary market. I think it's an important question, and it basically is going to depart from the post of a collector who sent it out on Instagram about 2 days ago. So I'm going to read that and I'm going to go from there. Um, I'm sure some of you already know, and there are more than 150 comments on the Instagram post. So it's a pretty lively discussion. I'm not going to really go through the comments, but certainly I would love to hear your opinions on it too. But for now, as we wait for I Love Maldives in the chat, we can continue to look at the Only Watch auction, which, as you know by now, is a biannual event under the patronage of His Serene Highness of Prince Albert II of Monaco, and it is actually held to benefit research on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I think the founder of the charity was called Luc Petavino, and the auction is organized these days by Christie's in Geneva, and the occasion is going to be on the 5th. And a lot of the most prestigious watchmakers, including some of the big independents, ascendant independents, very well recognized and established ones, make some crazy watches that speak to the theme, especially in terms of the colors that are chosen. And that was pretty much the predominant theme in these watches. A lot of rainbows, lots of sunshine. Just kidding. But yes, a lot of very colorful watches that spoke to the variety of colors chosen by the foundation. If you want to point my attention to any particular watches, I'd be more than happy to go there. We discussed most of them, but there's still a few that I would like to take a look at. The two pendant watches could be an interesting moment to discuss them now. This is lot 56. It is a watch that takes after a very classic design by Tiffany. The bird on a rock, which is a bird on a rock, which is a brooch designed by Jean Schlumberger for Tiffany and Co. in the 60s. And basically, for this particular edition of the Only Watch, Tiffany went ahead and designed it as a pendant watch with a mechanical movements, hand wound, with hour and minute display, and with a power reserve of 38 hours. A small and interesting piece, quite striking, with the famous bird perched on a 34 carat faceted aquamarine, and a dial that is snow set with diamonds, with a gold and diamond chain, and a platinum and 18 karat gold diamond bird on a rock motif. This is how the piece looks full frontal. This is the aquamarine that serves also as the case of the watch, as the container of the watch, let's put it this way. And here is a shot of the piece from the profile. Handcrafted by Tiffany & Co. artisans in Switzerland, the bird on a rock mechanical pendant watch re-envisions Jean Schlumberger's iconic brooch that he created for Tiffany in 1965. For this innovative Schlumberger by Tiffany & Co. pendant watch design, the bird is repositioned in a front-facing stance as it perches atop the case, cut and polished to an exacting standard over the span of 80 hours. The case features a faceted aquamarine crystal of over 34 carats, secured by 4 18-karat yellow gold prongs that sit atop a dial with 461 snow-set diamonds of over 1 total carat. Artisan set diamonds of 8 different diameters in a snow setting over the span of 11 hours, where the strategic placement of diamonds varying sizes decreases the appearance of visible metal, enhancing the brilliance of the timepiece. The platinum bird, set with over 3 carats of diamonds, has pink sapphire eyes and 18-karat yellow gold feet. This one-of-a-kind timepiece is crafted with a manual winding mechanical movement with a 38 power reserve and 21 joules. A very interesting piece, largely a jewelry piece, and a pendant watch, bird on a rock mechanical, only watch, with a pre-auction estimate of 350,000 to 500,000 Swiss francs. There's another pendant watch that's caught my interest, and if Tiffany & Co. is a usual suspect for this kind of design and that particular kind of watch, Richard Mille is not necessarily. This is lot 51 for Richard Mille pendant watch. It's called the Talisman Origine. A millennia ago, in a long since vanished society where mechanics, craftsmanship, and spirituality were united, the fascinating object emerged. Discovered in the heart of the Swiss mountains, the pendant was imprisoned for an eternity in its wooden receptacle. Nicknamed Talisman origin by the research teams. This mysterious golden relic certainly encapsulated the know-how of an old Swiss tribe. It's really funny, of course, when you recover an object from a millennia, even when it's in the Swiss mountains. Obviously, that was not an old Swiss tribe. Where was Switzerland a millennia ago? But certainly, there's some poetry there in the description. But this is basically a pendant modeled after a relic that was recovered in an excavation in Switzerland. And the pendant portion of it is expressly designed to resemble the recognizable tonneau-shaped case of Richard Mille, and the rest looks quite talismanic indeed. This is how the description continues. It was with extreme caution that watchmakers at Richard Mille began to analyze the shamanic relic. They used modern manufacturing technologies to learn more about its origin, properties, and its functioning, its skeletonized architecture, its complexity, the precision of its finishing, and assembly raised many questions, as well as its case, composed of rhodonite, titanium, and gold, bearing mysterious engraved symbols. So they are taking themselves pretty seriously at Richard Mille, as you know, and they really have to, because it is the emperor's new clothes kind of situation. So you have to really inject a lot of pomp and circumstance into everything they do, because the substance is a little weak usually, or something that you can acquire for a fraction of the price elsewhere, since the calibers are made either in Vaucher or API-RP. So go figure. The asymmetry of the work seems to echo the two crowns, one probably dedicated to the sun, the other to the moon. The discovery of this piece opens up a new perspective on the origins of creativity. Did the invisible energies contained in the talisman origin control the time, summon spirits, or hold the history of a highly developed Swiss civilization? What is certain is that sorry guys, I'm really trying my best to keep a straight face. What is certain is that it transcends the boundaries between the tangible world and the spiritual world. Codenamed RMS-14, this piece, offered to Only Watch, is a tribute to this enigmatic object, a Richard Mille interpretation of what this pendant could have looked like centuries past. The case is in satin finished pink gold with hand polished rims, hand engraved symbols. The case band is made out of grade 5 titanium. The claws also in grade 5 titanium, polished and microblasted with Swiss rhodonite inserts. The movement inside is caliber CRMT5, which is a skeletonized self-winding tourbillon movement, hours and minutes. Pardon me, the base plate and bridges are likewise made out of 3N and 5N gold, different grades of pink gold, basically, different shades of pink gold. Oh, wait. Sorry, my bad. 3N is yellow, 5N is pink. And I'm sure you can see that once you zoom in. Again, I apologize for my momentary blunder. So the base plate and bridges are made alternatively of yellow and pink gold, free sprung balance with variable inertia, variable geometry rotor. The necklace combines Swiss briar wood, gold, titanium, and rhodonite threaded on a metal and rubber string. This one-of-a-kind piece, which was inspired by an ancient relic recovered in Swiss mountains, is listed as, sorry, my bad, as lot 51 on the Only Watch as Talisman Origine, with the estimated value of 600,000 to 800,000 in Swiss francs. We have a couple of very interesting pieces. This is merely in sketch form, but I am very interested in this collaboration between Petermann Beda and Offray Paris. It is seemingly a simple three-hander with chronometric precision, alpha hands for hour and minutes, and an oversized sector style subsidiary dial for seconds at 6 o'clock. Petermann Beda most recently came into attention with their split second chronograph. $29.41. It's a really beautiful and fascinating piece with jumping minutes and an open worked dial. For this auction, they have, however, made a stainless steel three hands chronometer with individually soldered and stepped lugs. They simply call it chronomètre d'observatoire with the reference number 1342. The piece is going to have a diameter of 38.3 millimeters, and the thickness is going to be right under 11 millimeters. Flame whitened solid silver dial with black lacquered engraving, pink gold indices, hour, minutes, and hands, and flame blued steel second hand. The movement is going to be based on a Zenit 135, which is very bold of them, because you will remember last year, one of the hottest projects was, of course, Zenit's limited edition observatory grade 135 watches that were made by Kari Voutilainen in a three-pronged collaboration between Zenit, the brand, Kari Voutilainen, the watchmaker, and Philips, the auction house. So it's quite brave of these two young watchmakers to follow suit right after Kari Voutilainen to decide to work on Zenit 135 movements to produce their own chronometer, even if it is simply a one-off project. Just to give a little bit of a background, of, in fact, three watchmakers. Petermann Beda was founded in 2018 by Gaël Petermann and Florian Beda, watchmakers who met at the Geneva Watchmaking School in 2019. They introduced their iconic Seconde Morte reference, 1967, which is, of course, with the deadbeat seconds. The brand gained recognition in 2020 by winning the Revelation Prize at the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. In 2023, just this year, around the time of Watches and Wonders, they unveiled their split seconds chronograph, reference 2941, solidifying their commitment to craftsmanship and innovative designs, establishing the brand's prominence in the watchmaking industry. Offray Paris was founded in 2020 by Théo Offray, a Parisian watchmaker. The brand gained recognition with the release of its flagship model, the Tourbillon à Paris, known for its distinctive design and exceptional craftsmanship. I have to profess my ignorance. I have not even seen photographs of this watch, so I'm happy to learn. In 2022, Offray continued to impress the highly anticipated iteration of its inaugural model, the Tourbillon Grand Sport, showcasing their dedication to blending sophistication and sporty aesthetics. This solidified Offray Paris as a prominent name in the world of haute horlogerie. Let's take a look at some of these watches before we look at this, because there's not much to look at here at lot 46, for which the estimated value is $50,000 to $100,000. So let's check out some of the watches that first Offray has, and then we'll come back to Petermann Beda. All right. So this is the Tourbillon à Paris, if I'm not mistaken. And then they also have a model called Tourbillon Grand Sport. But only these pictures, apparently. Okay. Very interesting. I'm guessing this is the Tourbillon à Paris is a regulator design with an off-center hour dial at around 4 and 5 o'clock, right between there. You have the minute hand as the focal point of the watch, deployed at the center, obviously. And then you have the tourbillon at around 8 o'clock. And then the tourbillon Grand Sport takes on a similar design, but employs a classic two-hander look rather than a regulator look. There is a power reserve indicator, like a fan-like scale between 4 and 5 o'clock, and an open-worked dial, which seems to be their aesthetic. And that was nominated, apparently, no, shortlisted, not nominated, for the 2022 of the Grand Prize. We'll look at Itaman Bida. These are two young watchmakers who met at the watchmaking school, worked as watchmakers for Christie's for some time, worked at Lange as well. They made their entrance as independents with the reference 1967, which is a deadbeat seconds watch. So where you have that sweep, center seconds hand basically ticking rather than sweeping. And very fascinating because you have the deadbeat anchor exposed on the dial, which has become part of their aesthetic, as you would see in the chronograph as well. These are offered in pink gold or white gold, 39 millimeters in diameter, 10.7 millimeters in thickness, beautifully decorated, of course, in each case. Ten pieces in each metal, with a price right under 60,000 in Swiss francs, excluding the VAT. And their chronograph, and really their split second chronograph, is the 2941, which is priced basically at the same level as a Tech's split second chronograph, 5370. Just kidding, but it runs a pretty high bill. I mean, Patek, I think, sells their split second chronograph for almost 300,000, and Petermann Bedaz will run you a cool 250,000 rather than 300,000. This is going to be made in 10 pieces with a platinum case, 38.60 in diameter and 13.70 in thickness. And here is a look at this very serious piece. As you can see, it really conveys some gravity and distinction. Column wheels for each chronograph. The minute hand for the totalizer is a jumping hand, which should be expected, but is not always provided. And the case has a very beautiful open-worked aesthetic. The dial plates are in platinum and sapphire. The bevels are polished by hand, finished by hand. All the hands are finished by hand as well. And as you can see, alternatively in heat blued stainless steel or in 18 carats to what my eyes looks like 18 karat pink gold. And the indices too look like they are heat blued before they're applied. The movement's decoration includes Côte de Genève on the bridges with hand-polished chamfers, sun graining and perlage on the main plate, with the steel parts beveled, polished, and black polished on the surface, all by hand, circular graining on the wheels with hand beveled and polished arms, circular graining on the balance, sun graining on the barrel, and perlage inside, snail graining on the ratchet wheel. Hey, GD, nice to see you, man. We were looking at Peter Mambeda's split-second chronograph, since their entry to the Omni Watch is a mere sketch of a chronometer with three hands, hour, minutes, and seconds on a subsidiary dial. So just to get a little bit more educated, look at that stunning jewel. This is how it's supposed to look from behind. Wow. 243,000 in Swiss francs. I mean, we are hopefully, once Maldives joins in the chat, hopefully we're going to talk about these pricing policies, pricing practices among the independents. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I think it's an important conversation to have. But since I'm doing it at his urging, I don't want to start it right now. So we were looking at Peter Mambeda offre Paris chronomètre d'observatoire, which I think is an interesting undertaking because it comes on the heels of what Kari Voutilainen did for Zenit in a 10-piece limited edition, working on their observatory grade 135 calibers. If I remember correctly, pardon me, it was a 10-piece limited edition with one Salmon dial, one sold for charity, but I do want to bring up a picture of it, just so we know what we are talking about. This was the watch that Kari Voutilainen built by restoring, refinishing, and assembling a classic Zenit caliber 135-0. And the piece had, of course, this radial guilloche in the subsidiary dial for seconds, and a lovely fish scale kind of guilloche pattern for the hour track, applied daggers for the indices, stunning Dauphine hands for the hour and minutes, and an observatory grade Zenit movement that has been used in observatory trials, but was never assembled for and was really never meant for making the movement for a wristwatch, right? Because Zenit had caliber 135 at the same time period for their wristwatches, but the 135O were basically assembled in these wooden boxes and sent to observatories for trial. I want to see because they actually had a presentation box for these pieces that was kind of modeled after that style, and the one of a kind version, which was sold to benefit the Komen Foundation, I believe, but at any rate, breast cancer charity is like this. Let's see. Hmm. Yeah, I wasn't able to find it. I'm so sorry. Maybe. No, I don't think this write up has it either. Too bad. Anyway, but I think it's quite brave that these three young watchmakers would come together to work on a Zenit 135 nearly a year after Kari Voutilainen did something with it. So quite interesting. Oh, Maldives is here. Hey, Maldives, thank you so much. 49.99 super sticker arriving on a rocket. So we can, for now, at the very least, move on to our topic of discussion tonight. I'm going to read this Instagram post momentarily, but I do want to set the scene first. Because it's, even though it raises a concern, I think that has broader implications for the entire industry. It really focuses on Philippe Dufour and especially his simplicity watches. I'm not going to go through the entire history of Philippe Dufour, but I will start by saying that the simplicity was introduced in 2000. Initially for the Japanese markets, almost exclusively at 34 millimeters. Uh, I'm not sure if the orders were necessarily flowing in, but certainly early on there was an interest for a bigger case. The 37 millimeter thus soon followed. And I think between year 2000 up until 2015, and even a few more towards the end of that decade, Philippe Dufour ended up maybe making about 200 examples of this watch. And I think the list price was somewhere around 35,000 or something at the time. Now, around year 2020, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this watch, which had by then already become an icon, and which had a lot of interest among some of the high rolling collectors and was selling for many factors of that initial retail price on the secondary markets. Philippe Dufour teamed up with his friend, collector, but also the horological mogul, Claude Sfer, and they decided that they would make 22 examples of the Simplicity to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the watch. Number 21 would be kept by Philippe Dufour himself, and number 00 would be auctioned off. So that was done by Philips, and I do want to read here. 00 sold for 1.36 million Swiss francs at Philips in the November of 2020. So that's the equivalent of 1.5 million in US dollars, basically. And another fold in the story, another part of this narrative, just a couple of days ago, again, a collected man, and I'm sure you have seen this in my thumbnail already, a collected man listed one of these pieces. They were made, again, in 22 examples. The 00 sold for about 1.5 million in US dollars at a Philips auction. Number 21 was kept by Monsieur Dufour himself. And this is the first one that comes up in auction. I believe there were only 7 of these with this encased in platinum and made with this stunning blue Guilloche dial. And this is the first one that is ever coming to auction. Well, not auction, actually, for public sale. And Collected Man listed it outright at 1.3 million in US dollars. Now, I need to add 2 more things. That when these were offered, when 20 of these were offered to the public for sale, 10 of them were allocated in their traditional way, which is to their highly esteemed collectors and maybe some of their connections. And then 10 people were picked through a lottery, but the list price, the retail price of the 20th anniversary Simplicity was actually already almost 20 times the original. It is rumored to have been $650,000 at retail. So that's the background. That's the backdrop of our story. Hey, Ali. Sorry, I didn't see you immediately.
No problem.
Thank you for coming by. Have you been listening a little bit?
I have been listening. Yeah, I've been listening the past 10 minutes, maybe.
Okay, good. Because I do want you to also be part of this conversation. Um, Bruce G says the simplicity was the inspiration for the Lyrique. Lyrique is a beautiful watch that was, of course, organized by a community of enthusiasts, spearheaded by um, Bill Sanders of Watch Art Sci, friend of this channel, who also came to this channel for an interview to discuss that very watch. Check it out. I'm gonna actually send you guys the link. And I've just about 3 weeks ago, Bruce G, I had the pleasure of seeing one of these lyrique etude number ones in the flesh, so to speak, and I was very excited. It's really a beautiful piece, and a lot of watch for the money for sure. So the backdrop of the story: Philippe Dufour Simplicity started its life at around $35,000 retail. By the time the 20th anniversary arrived, it was so desperately desired. The 20 examples were set for sale at $650,000. The first example of which, the double O, being already sold in auction for $1.5 million to kind of set things in motion. Now, I want to read this Instagram post by Horologie Ancienne from about 2 days ago. And I want to start by saying I really like and respect this account. It is everything we like, guys. It's decent writing. It's great watches with some stunning variety, incredible horology, attention to both technical and aesthetic detail, and perhaps most importantly, this is actually a father and son couple. It is the son who writes apparently the messages, but he always speaks in the first person plural, and apparently everything he writes is vetted by his father as well. So that intergenerational story, that bond that a father and son has through watches is something that I adore, something that I admire. So anything that I say after this hopefully will not be taken in a wrong way, because I mostly disagree with what Horologie Ancienne says in this post, even though I recognize that it is a very complex issue that has more than two sides to it, that has more than two perspectives to it. So, for us, Philippe Dufour is amongst the best finishers to ever touch a movement. I'll freely admit I could not get allocation of his watches, yet I was not disgruntled. If I ever was asked about the legend that is Mr. Dufour, I only had words of admiration to deliver. Luckily, I was able to find a simplicity for a very reasonable price from a second-hand dealer. That was apparently at the time, I later read in the comments, for about $250,000 in USD. It sat perfectly, pardon me, it sat perfectly on my wrist and was finished to such a high level, one would have to ponder if it even had terrestrial origins. Beautiful. To put into perspective, when the dealer called to inform me that he had one, I dropped everything I was doing, rushed down the motorway as if I was on the way to the emergency room. On the way back, you would have thought I won the lottery, the way I was excessively grinning. In short, I deeply value his watches. With the introduction of his latest simplicity range, he's talking about the moment in 2020, the 20th anniversary moment, where things have gotten much more recognizable, much more coveted, much more fiercely coveted, even fought over, one can say. I found myself practically frothing in anticipation to get one. I reached out once again directly and was surprised to see they had an allocation for me. I was eagerly about to confirm the order until I discovered the retail price is 650,000 in Swiss francs. So I'll make a little pause here because I've forgot one more fold in the story. It was actually Monsieur Dufour's 75th birthday at the beginning of the month, of last month, I should say. And there, his wife, Elisabeth Dufour, and Philippe Dufour made an announcement. They created the Philippe and Elisabeth Dufour Foundation, a nonprofit focused on multiple areas of humanitarian, not horological needs. Those needs include access to food, water, healthcare, housing, education, and support for the environment. The nonprofit already has fundraising underway for projects in India, Peru, Madagascar, Lebanon, Indonesia, and even Switzerland, where they hope to improve healthcare access in the rural villages. And apparently they have earmarked some small portion of the funds as well to support burgeoning artistic craftspeople around the world by expanding access to young talents and all manual artistic crafts. So very noble goals. They say we wanted a philanthropic foundation that is open to all the major challenges of the world is facing, with a future that appears rather bleak. There are urgent situations, whether humanitarian, environmental, educational, or public health related. We do not claim to be able to solve all the problems, but we ardently desire to do what we can to alleviate the suffering and despair of the most deprived individuals by contributing our part to the greater good. As the saying goes, little streams make big rivers. Now, I'm putting this out there not to, simply say, hey, they're doing it for charity. It doesn't matter how much they price it for. However, I did want to include that because, especially at this point, I think the wording is quite harsh and he's sticking to it, or rather they are sticking to it. I discovered the retail price is 650,000 Swiss francs. I find that extraordinarily greedy, Horology Ancien says, so much so that it has deeply tarnished his legacy for me. And here's the kicker for me. I got even more incensed here, of course. What do I know? I could pay $1 million for a vintage time-only Patek. Complications aren't the only way to justify price. It can also be done in historical value and provenance. But for a retail price to be charged for a brand new watch, I need to have a modicum of sense. Now, I understand Dufour was for years too reasonable with his pricing. Should he have asked for 200,000 or even 300,000 in Swiss francs? The retail used to be 50K. That's later. Initially, apparently, it was more around 30, 35. I would have raised an eyebrow, but I would understand. There's a limit, a red line that he crossed. I declined the latest simplicity because I can't support unhinged greediness. I mean, very harsh words, honestly, especially right after he says, I would pay $1 million for a time-only Patek. I do not understand how any modern time-only watch could ever be worth more at retail than a minute repeater. It is as if Dufour has become the embodiment of the COVID market hysteria. One cannot use secondary market prices as a guide to setting retail, because the funny thing with the secondary market is that it's fickle and always subject to change dramatically. Now, Ali, I will want to hear from you as well, but I will start by saying I cannot countenance this kind of approach in any way, because I know Horology Ancien is much smarter. He couldn't have missed this point. I think he is essentially saying, let's gray market dealers and auction houses make the profit on the elbow grease, on the blood, sweat, and tears of the watchmaker. Leave that sort of speculative game entirely to dealers and auctioneers. The watchmaker should make the watch for me. I should be able to buy it at a very reasonable retail price, whether that is 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, depending on how these pieces are rated. And the secondary market value should never have anything to do with how this person sells their watches. Now, I will put the caveat at the very beginning, because again, I understand this question is much more complex than just be of a two-sided antagonism, black and white, and auction houses and watch dealers on the one end, and the watchmaker or even heritage manufacturers on the other. Because as I mentioned at the very beginning, at this point, watchmakers like Philippe Dufour, Kari Voutilainen, and others collaborate already as part of their business practices with auction houses, and in fact take part in creating the speculative conditions of the horological market that we are inhabiting right now. So I'm not saying they are not themselves complicit in it. I'm not saying that they don't play a part in creating the speculation in the first place. But what does he expect Dufour to do? Continue selling watches for 50 to 100K so that a collected man or Phillips or Christie's turns around and gets it from one of the people who bought it for 100 and sell it for 1.5 million? The watchmaker should just make, the margin, and, the $1 million should be reserved for the auctioneers and flipper collectors. What kind of nonsense is that? What do you think, Ali? I'm kind of incensed, honestly.
So as you mentioned, it's a very complex issue. The first thing that came to mind as you were, reading this, is that I've actually spoken to people on YouTube, on Watch YouTube, that have a very negative view of nonprofits and charities, right? A very negative one.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I understand. So I've actually spoken on air that I donate a fairly substantial part of my pre-tax income to charity. And in the past, I don't know, 10 years, maybe more at this point, I've used services like Charity Navigator to help me determine charities that use their money wisely. And I also appreciate the fact that some of these really big charities, the reason why they have, say, the CEO of Lockheed Martin at running the charity, is because the CEO of Lockheed Martin can pick up the phone and reach 30 millionaires and a handful of billionaires to support a charity. So sometimes at a certain scale, that is just the reality of the situation. That doesn't, whatever your other misgivings are about Lockheed Martin, it doesn't absolve them, right? But this is reality. So I think a lot of people are They have misgivings of the free market, and they have misgivings of nonprofits, the way that they've been orchestrated. Oddly enough, Rolex is a nonprofit, right? And there's that whole,
Yeah.
Irony of that sort of discussion. Uh, so I think this is probably an incomplete view of the situation. I also don't know that this is an unreasonable market approach for such a small brand. See, if Rolex was doing it, it would seem fundamentally different to me, because they're pumping out 1.2, 1.3 million
Okay. Yeah.
watches a year, right? But Rolex is also doing the CPO program. They're trying to find a kind of happy middle ground to make sure that they get part of that market as well. And I see there's nothing wrong with that. Then there's also, say, gray market dealers like Luxury Bazaar that have their own charity, and they've had charity events the past few years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see no reason whatsoever to criticize one person or another. You either buy their products or you don't. I mean, it's really that simple. I don't think it takes away from Philippe Dufour's mystique or provenance or capabilities. And I would also like to note, okay, maybe I don't want to note this.
You can ask. I mean, we can, you don't have to censor yourself.
Well, so I think that it is always very easy for people from the outside to not understand where people's history lies and where their family comes from and what things are important to them personally, right? So there are a number of watchmakers. We actually spoke about certain books that that have come from Holocaust survivors and things like that, right? So
Right.
and there are a number of companies that I know of that they have very strong religious beliefs, personal beliefs, things like that. And I'm not going to begrudge them their beliefs. I may not agree with them, but I take a very Christopher Hitchens point of view, which is, I may be anti-theistic, let's say, but if I'm invited to a synagogue, I'm going to adhere to the protocol of the synagogue, right? And frankly, we're invited to Philippe Dufour's table. That's it. He doesn't owe us anything, right?
Right.
Um, so you again can choose to be a patron or not, but there's no reason to disrespect him unless he is committing some sort of obvious, crime or
Right.
despicable action, which he is
And
not.
again, that's why I started with saying I'm going to mention the fact that they have just established a charity foundation. So it's not just going into Philippe Dufour's three-piece suits and his new Royal Oak Jumbo or whatever else. Um, he has other ways of using his money beyond. The guy is known as a character, right? In the sense that he really does hold the hands and help younger watchmakers. He really does support, even before he established a named foundation and whatever else, watchmaking in Le Sentier and in the valley specifically. So I don't want to. I don't want that to simply wash over and paper over anything that might be open to criticism or even open to condemnation in his business practices. But I do want to put that out there. You might be extremely cynical about foundations at the micro or macro level, but I am too, in an important sense, right? And for that reason, I actually feel much more comfortable donating to foundations like UNICEF, because I find more local stuff usually very self-aggrandizing, and uh, I'm much more cynical of that. Even though they are supposedly running it much better and there's less overhead and it's not going to bureaucrats, blah blah blah, I usually feel a little icky about local charities. But that's my problem. Again, like you said, that doesn't mean that they are thereby immoral because it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
In the
I'm
same
going
way,
to take it a step further than you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to take it a step further, and obviously we have different political proclivities, and still remain, friends. I don't care if Philippe Dufour came out and he said, "I'm going to raise my prices because I really actually want to build a Porsche collection." Let him say it. Okay, you choose to do business with him or not, right?
that's it.
It's like that's just it. Um, and it's so he's put his opinion out here. I disagree with the opinion. Um, but in
Wait,
this particular
whose opinion? Horology Ancien or?
horology and Sian, right? I just disagree with his opinion. And you're right in terms of like what he has brought to us. Philippe Dufour has arguably brought um, a solid third or half, maybe even more, of the next generation of like prestigious, great names and horological marvels, or at least influenced heavily, right? He has brought some pretty definitive textbooks, to the topic, right? So it's not as if he hasn't contributed, punched above his weight class in terms of his contributions. Um,
Yeah,
and
and again,
lastly
like
on
you
that,
said,
I will also say, let's say for a moment that a given organization or person has nefarious purposes, right?
mm,
I've also been the type of person that says, say, a business doesn't want to make cakes for, people who are part of the LGB environment. Well, so be it. Let them not make cakes, and I would rather know about their bigotry up front, let's say, and not patronize them. Um,
sure. I mean, look, but what I was saying essentially is it's not a problem for me either, right? If
yeah,
I can afford Dufour's watches, if and all he wants to do is actually enrich himself and maybe build a generational wealth for his family for this next 12 generations, so be it. I don't mind that either. I'm only saying that, he, the guy is actually quite cool beyond just making cool watches. And again, I'm not, it's not even in my league. I do admire them, but it's not even at that price point. It's not something that I would go for. I wouldn't also buy it at $250,000 either, even if I had that kind of money to throw at a single watch. But for me, it was, the weird part of that particular write-up was specifically when he says I would pay $1 million for a vintage time only Patek Philippe. So for me, that exposes everything about that particular viewpoint. He's really expecting the living independent makers to give him a watch at a fair, what he considers to be a fair price point. And I don't know him personally. I don't know whether he sells any watches or not. But this kind of collector, I'm not singling out Horloger Ancien or a collector similar to him, but there are so many of these collectors who would then turn around and put the watch up on auction um, in the next season, and it would sell for 5 times more. If it were priced at 250, it would at least sell for $1 million. So you're
yeah,
telling me that Dufour should be happy selling his watch for 250 and see it come up for auction in the next season, and it will sell for more than 1 million, and basically the auction house and the quote unquote collector who bought the piece will earn more money than the person who made the watch. I mean, again, you were saying we have different politics, but honestly, unless you are a very callous person with no consideration of anyone's labor, I don't understand who can think in their mind that's a justifiable scenario.
I'm not. Yeah, I don't think in this case we have. I don't think in this case that we have a different viewpoint. There's also a market aspect of it I don't understand, which is you have Omega Rolex. You know, Rolex is and Omega are doing boutique only, and their existing partners like Watches of Switzerland have to stand up their own boutique. That is certainly, you know, a play by Rolex to reduce interference in their market and marketing. You know, they're not eliminating the middleman, but they are certainly exerting a large degree of control to the middleman, right? There's no obligation by any of these artisans to create a whole ecosystem around them. Um, you know, there is no obligation for any artist of any form to use Etsy or maintain prices that allow certain middlemen. And we see that in every market, right? There are certain markets like the VAR market, the value added reseller market for software and hardware and technology, which is they provide, you know, they call it value added, right? They provide professional services and whatnot. So many businesses um, use that for that reason because they can provide horizontal and vertical integration of product delivery and professional services. It helps drive adoption. But there's no reason for that in most artistic endeavors and certainly not in horology, right? So yeah, I see no reason that Philippe Dufour should be obligated to create a secondary market whatsoever. And frankly, he hasn't taken it away. If the Dufour pieces he sells directly for 650,000 Swiss franc, people are still going to take their 300,000 Swiss franc margin. They're still going to flip them,
Yeah, and
right?
they did. I mean, I started by showing what a collected man put up for sale earlier
Yeah,
this
that's
week.
right.
They're
That was the
selling
first
one of
thing I
the
caught. Yeah.
watches, 1.3 million dollars already, and he sold it for half of that.
Yeah.
So people are even eating on the speculation of what are seemingly overpriced watches. But again, I've read my Adam Smith, but I'm not. I don't necessarily believe that there is an invisible hand that governs the free market. Obviously, there are so many different actors who enter that space with their own purposes and intentions, and for me, that the accumulation or agglomeration of those intentions don't necessarily add up to a justified or justifiable situation, certainly not in the pricing of this. But even as someone who agrees with horology ancien when he says this is the post-pandemic um, craze embodied, I have to say, sure enough. But then again, from those unconscionable prices, from my perspective, would I rather have the watchmaker eat from it? Watchmakers who have, for the most part, really toiled away in silence. And a lot of these independent watchmakers who had really hard time making ends meet until like 2010. Even Philippe Dufour had a hard time sustaining his own artisanship until 2010. That's not ancient history. I'm not trying to make a play on words with horology ancient. That's not ancient history. So, would I rather have the watchmaker eat something out of it, or the auction house? Would I rather have the watchmaker eat something out of it, or the billionaire who spends money on his watches? I mean, come on, let's be serious a little.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I have no disagreement with. And just stating for the record, um, while I absolutely agree in free market and market dynamics, that is not what we're living currently in the modern Western world. You know, crony capitalism and market controls and whatnot exist. So just for the record, I'm not naive enough to believe that current market pricing, for the most part, is actually free market, especially in certain industries, in very specific industries. But I won't digress any further. So yeah,
no,
we're on
I
the same
didn't.
page
I
here.
didn't mean to imply that either.
No,
But
no, no. I want to state that because certain people, you know, I did actually. I don't know. Was it here? No, it wasn't here. I recently on one of the shows, there was a topic of things like you mentioned generational wealth. One of my positions, which is a little, you know, different than a lowercase L libertarian type of position, or a minarchist type position is that I actually don't believe in generational wealth. I think there should be a fairly substantial inheritance tax, not what some people are saying ridiculous, but I do think it should be fairly substantial, progressive inheritance tax when people start hitting the 9-digit inherited wealth, mark. And that I just believe from a moral ethical standpoint to make sure that hard work and enterprising, goes across generations. So I did get some flack for that recently. So I'm just stating that before maybe some of the same viewers decide to say some choice words my way again. And at the same time on that stream, I said things like, abolish the IRS, but apparently that's not good enough. Either way. So now, not completely unrelated, man, these are pretty watches.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, look,
Oh God.
The thing is, when I did say, even if I had $250,000 or more, this is not necessarily the genre I would be going for. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate the kind of finishing that goes into this. I mean, look at those deep internal angles, or interior angles, I should say. Look at those distinctive stripes, the oversized jewels. It's really something else. And that was that detail. I think it was one picture before. The hand engraved, of course, plaques.
That's crazy, man. I love this.
Yeah.
I could never, again, if I had the money, I couldn't pull this off anyway. But it is, it is a marvel.
Any other perspectives you would want to introduce to this discussion? Because I don't want it to be too one-sided, because maybe I will underline a few things if you don't have something else to add.
No, please do first. There may be one other angle I can come at it from, but please do.
No, let's add that new angle, because I was gonna, by underline, I meant, emphasize what I already said. So if you have a new angle, please, I would rather hear that.
So there's a possibility, and in another conversation that was not dissimilar on this, but it wasn't related to horology. It came to light later on that the actor that was doing the criticism knew behind the scenes. So, like you said, we don't know if they resell watches, for example, but the actor that was doing criticism knew behind the scenes that the person that they were saying was making a unjust change to their business model had prior agreements that they no longer found suitable. So I can't rule out the fact that maybe there's a possibility Philippe Dufour had prior agreements with auction houses, and this is now a power play because he made a bad deal. I can't rule that out. There's no, so it's the same thing you said on the other side. We can't rule out that maybe there's a very personal, intimate reason why somebody does not like the price increases. So I want to throw it out there. I doubt it, because I think we would have heard about it, but I can't rule it out either.
Yeah, which is very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I wanted to underline as well. That's why I mentioned, look, Philippe Dufour brought Claude Sphère with a very specific recognition in mind. He wanted to use his networking, his knowledge, his experience in buying and selling watches to market this 20th anniversary initiative. And they didn't just, come up with that idea of selling the 00, selling the 00 with Philips on one of the short walks they take to the shores of Lake Geneva, smoking their pipes. That was a very calculated business decision, because when one of those watches in advance sells for almost $1.5 million in US, it sinks so much easier. It's easier to swallow when they say, "Hey, it costs $700,000 if you buy it, you know, from us," because ultimately that sounds like a good deal, right? One of them just sold for 1.5 million. So in the from that perspective, it's they are in fact taking part in the speculation. They are in fact using the auction circuit as a way of inflating their own prices, for sure. But even before that simplicity sold for that price, they had already reached 250,000 and up. So the number that Horology Ancien throws out there by saying, "Hey, I would have raised an eyebrow, but I would have paid 200,000, 300,000." He doesn't come up with that number at random. That's that's what he paid for his simplicity, $250,000. So because I mean, I don't know his books, but he admits as much in some of the comments. So that's what I wanted to emphasize. So of course they have taken part in speculating that, but if they hadn't, Philips would still acquire one of the 20 examples for the next season because they know which collectors are allocated and they know which one would be willing to sell, and they would still sell it, maybe not for 1.5, but 800,000 or maybe a million or a little more. So ultimately, even if they are taking part in that speculative circuit, again, would I rather have Dufour eat from what is already on the table, perhaps playing part in increasing that pie as well? Or would I just have Philips and a rich collector make more money out of it? For sure, every single auction price is manipulated. I say this all the time. I agree with you, Maldives. Ancien stressed he thinks this pricing strategy is too short-term oriented thinking, and in the long term will hurt the brand. What
Let me
say what you want to say, but also please comment on this too, Ali, when you get the chance.
no, I wanted to comment on this specifically when I saw it in the chat.
Mm.
So Philippe Dufour's pricing strategy needs to be short term by definition, right? His daughter is, I don't know if his daughter's going to take over the business, but his daughter is, from what I understand, a legitimate designer and power to herself. But his daughter is not going to carry his weight on her shoulders the same way. There's many different reasons for that, right? Or there could be many reasons for that. So he might absolutely be saying, I want incredibly short term vision because my daughter is going to have her own brand and her own perspective, and it's going to by necessity be different than mine. So he may be opening the door for that, where she targets a completely different series of markets. And in part, let's go back to 2010, right? The pricing strategy for any mechanical watch today might be too short term because of simply the rise of Whoops and Fitbits and Apple Watch and everything like that. We don't know that this market is going to continue to have this, this surge of micro brands and whatnot, and for how long anyway. So any pricing strategy, any business strategy in this market might be short term anyway, right? And you're going to see more companies that do things like Tag and Breitling do, which are hybrid watches and or purely digital watches. I think that's likely inevitable, right? So this may be short term by design. I see, and that could also be a way of just handing the business off to his daughter.
So that's a great point. Daniela Dufour, right here, by the way, wearing a simplicity made by her own hand. Um, which looks nice. Maybe not as nice as Philippe Dufour, but Daniela Dufour looks nice as well. Personally, too, by the way. Feel free to slide into my DMs, Daniela. You're stunning and a brilliant watchmaker. Um, but yes, you're absolutely right. Even if she takes over the Dufour brand, um, there's no guarantee and there's really no reason that it should continue on simplicity. And in fact, the short-term strategy may well be, let's sell, well, they have already sold them, but let us sell these 20 examples for the 20th anniversary um, for as much as we can. I am 75 years old. I'm not going to work forever. Maybe I want to work until, God forbid again, until I pass away. But Daniela should be able to do whatever she wants. And in fact, the fact that simplicity is discontinued once, when, I don't even want to articulate this and put it in the world, but, we are all mortal beings. Simplicity gets discontinued. Daniela takes the brand in a different direction. Certainly, she's not going to continue making just time-only watches, even if it ends up remaining this sort of very small-scale operation, which makes about, at most 15, 20 watches per year. It's not going to remain that way. And if it's a one-person operation at any rate, at this high grade, if it is made from scratch, there's no way you can make more than 3 watches per year. So, yeah.
I think it's an excellent comment by Maldives. That is, but that's kind of my take on it. Is I just don't know. She can sing as well.
Well, honestly, yes, absolutely, absolutely, and she can sing as well. Apparently, she sang at the 75th birthday party. And Maldives, I understand that. I would underline this. I would agree with this emphatically, even. And I'm saying this as someone who covers auctions here as well. It's not, maybe I would choose different words, but ultimately, even if we agree that, quote unquote, there are alleged manipulations in the auction circuit, do you think there are no manipulations when independent watchmakers don't get involved themselves? I'm not trying to, make it more digestible. I'm not trying to justify or legitimate such actions. But if we believe, by definition, that the first Dufour Simplicity from the 20th anniversary series, when that piece gets sold, there will be manipulation in trying to make that price as steep as possible. Now, some of that quote unquote manipulation will happen in very professional terms, in established terms that never even potentially cross over into an alleged illegal sphere. Some of it might, allegedly. And even then what, Maldives? I will have to say, then what? Even if in that kind of scenario, I would rather have the watchmaker reap some of the benefits as well, rather than not being involved and, crying themselves to sleep in, because they are not reaping any of these benefits. I will just say this story. Okay. I had the pleasure of meeting recently Josh Shapiro, right? The American watchmaker here based in Southern California. And it was shortly after he discovered that one of his infinity pieces
I remember this story.
was being sold, and the guy was genuinely heartbroken, right? And Josh doesn't sell his watches for 200,000, not even 100,000 for this new series. And the infinities were sold for even less. But ultimately, um, he just felt betrayed, because he had established a personal bond with this person. He made a watch for that person that had important customizations, personalized details, and he saw it being sold on the secondary market, being auctioned off. And that hurt him beyond the price margins and whatever else. So for people who make watches at that small scale, they're they are married to their profession. They feel very passionately about their projects. I'm not saying that every single one would be like Josh necessarily, but a lot of them also, before they are financially hurt, they are emotionally hurt when they see that a collector they trusted to allocate one of their watches, which had an excess of demand, a collector to whom they gave a good deal, a fair price, a collector for whom they toiled over exchanging personal details and applying certain customizations, turns around not more than a year later and sells that watch. That's a betrayal of trust, and it happens every day when you start selling more than 20, 30, 50, 100 watches. So let's not forget that. I mean, again, I'm not saying that auction prices should be manipulated, or that independent watchmakers should go out there and use all possible tactics to try to hike up their prices on the market so that the demand is artificially increased. No, but even in that kind of ridiculously dramatized scenario, um, should they just stand in a corner? Why do we expect better morality from people who are smaller? That's my question. Do we expect this kind of
I think morality the word you actually want to use there.
huh?
Is morality the word you want to use there? I'm
Yeah,
asking sincerely.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Like, why do we expect watch of all these actors in the horological industry? Why do we expect the independent watchmaker to have the strongest moral backbone, to have the noblest character, to have the purest of intentions? Auction houses don't. 99% of gray market dealers don't. AP doesn't. Rolex doesn't.
How dare you besmirch AP?
Please say more. You can play the good cop. Maybe you'll get
No,
even better
I don't know.
locations.
I asked, it was a sincere question, if you wanted to use the word morality, because yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, that's a different discussion. It's actually a discussion I'll probably have with you at some point or another. But I do understand your point either way.
Wait, which discussion are we talking about?
If is it immoral, or is it immoral not to play by the same rules as everybody else? Like, what's actually worse? Uh,
Mm.
in the market, it's a different discussion than certain types of morality, say drugs or violent crime. Um, but yeah, it's a completely different discussion. Not worth. You made yourself clear. I've got actually no. I would probably use, ethical, morality. I'd probably use the same verbiage, but it is something that troubles me at times.
Yeah, it may have sounded a little too maybe severe, but I think that's exactly what I mean, because what does it mean for for horology ancienne to say unhinged greediness? Is that not a moral judgment?
That's a very moral judgment. I think it was completely uncalled here. I'm going to throw a random wrench into this conversation. Um, Not entirely random. There was somebody on IG who had a reel that I just saw. I think it was yesterday,
Hmm.
that was talking about money laundering using watches and how it's very, very prevalent. And I'm sorry, I don't actually believe it's very prevalent at all. And I have professional reason to believe that. But it's really bizarre to me that, because in the context was like, if I have this one watch and I buy it and I buy it for 20,000 or 40,000 or whatever, I can wear it through the airport, get back to my home country, and then I lose some money on it, and there's this and that, but that's the cost of the laundering. It's kind of it's a fairly ridiculous premise as far as I'm concerned in terms of how to launder money. Um, that people are taking international flights on a regular basis, wearing watches uh, as their mechanism of laundering money. And people say that about auction houses, that this is one of the ways people launder money. Now, auction houses to me would make more sense because of the scale of which you can do it,
Right.
right? And at a distance. So it's just a weird thing that there's this whole subculture that believes that people are buying Rolexes in the States, and as a way of laundering money, traveling back and forth internationally. And if they are, then those people are among the worst money launderers in the history of mankind.
Hmm. Like you said, there is it's a question of scale. Um, Knowing that people have done similar schemes with diamonds um, since time immemorial, let's say, it, to me, it's not an absurd scenario, but whether it is really widespread and something that a lot of people do globally, I can't comment on that. But I know for a fact that, again, without singling out anyone, so I'm not going to name any nationalities or countries here, but I know in places where there is a certain um, risk over your wealth being depreciated by the state, um, where there is a certain scrutiny over your possessions, no matter how you may have come upon them and acquired them legally or illegally, through corruption or through hard work. Um, I know it is an easier way of moving certain amounts of money in relative discretion over borders,
Sure,
and
absolutely. And we have had this
uh,
conversation about Pakistan and
and
India.
I,
You mentioned
I,
diamonds.
I I didn't say any country at all. But what I'm saying is the ultimately I think it's but I would not use the term money laundering for something like that to begin with, at least not in a blanket
Exactly.
manner.
That's the thing. That it's different. Asset
Yeah.
protection is different than the context of money laundering, right?
And some of that may be money laundering if that wealth was acquired in the first place through illegal means, through corruption, through etc.
Yeah.
But money laundering, like you said, implies already a very severe judgment and very specific accusation, which may be well placed or which may be completely off the mark. But yeah, people carry wealth over borders
Sure.
in watches and precious stones. It happens.
Sure. No, absolutely. It was the context of this being like a regular money laundering operation I thought was fairly absurd. But there are, and I mentioned countries, and I won't mention them again because I have no hesitation because I'm not mentioning them in negative context. I'm not actually mentioning them as a cultural condemnation. There are certain countries where you do not have nearly as much freedom, and increasingly, like even in the U.S., nearly as much freedom for cashless society or asset management and things like that, right? So in some places, it just may be a life necessity, and that's just the way it is. Anyway, that was a you know that was a random aside because it picked up some steam on Instagram recently, and I was just shocked, like that. Yeah, all these people buying watches on the ADs, they're actually not. They're not just flipping them; they're money laundering with them. I'm like, I don't think you understand the scale of that is not not sustainable. Like, there's not going to be a remake where of Scarface where Tony Montana is getting regular Rolex allotments at the scale to launder his cocaine enterprise. It's not happening.
Look, I mean, I'm sure there are a few people who have turned this into an operation. I mean, in the age of backpack dealers, it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, I think we look again, not singling out any particular gray market dealer, but in the age of social media, where they love, living large and making reality shows out of their, whole establishment. You can't blame people negatively characterizing them in the same exaggerated and theatrical manner. So clearly, yes, if people who deal out of backpacks can have reality shows on YouTube and actually make money off of that as well, I would not necessarily hold it against some people to think that they might be engaged in illegal business practices on an international scale, because some of them actually are. Um, but again, I wouldn't malign the entire business like that.
For the record, any of my gray market friends who are watching this this show, young Brando's remarks do not necessarily reflect mine, nor the other way around. But there are a
Indeed.
couple of backpack dealers in particular. Man, I've got to behave. There are a couple that have done some outlandish things on air, for that matter. Um, but yeah, no, I have to laugh. I have a number of friends in the gray market, and then I have a number of, I would say, enemies in the gray market.
Yeah, I mean, look, technically, you know, uh, I have to be honest. When I use the gray market, I almost always use it in negative terms. It's
I
I have
totally understand that too, actually.
I
Like, I
have
totally
people
respect
I
that.
have people who are, vintage watch dealers or sell pieces, secondhand, pre-owned, whatever else, who are just fine business people. There's nothing shady or tricky that they do. Ultimately, they just deal in watches. But there is, especially in the last, you know 5, 6, 7 years, there is a new breed. And I have no time for it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't
in the
disagree.
in the immortal words of Schwarzenegger as Conan, I've never prayed for you, I have no time for it.
No, I don't disagree. And man, some of these courses people peddle, oh my God, holy crap. It's nuts now. It's nuts.
Maldives says buy watch for 100, put it in auction, buy it for 1,000 using your offshore gray funds. Man. Yeah, look, I mean, again, um, I'm not naming a particular auction house or anything, but in the art world, it has happened. These kinds of things have happened. So, of
Sure,
course,
no,
some
absolutely.
people use some people use these things for money laundering.
No,
No doubt.
absolutely. No, you're right. I'm not denying that. I'm speaking very specifically of this scale of, people flying in and out of the country
Hmm.
to buy Rolex allotments. It's I really don't care how powerful of your relationship with a given Rolex AD is. That's not a sustainable model uh, for any criminal enterprise. Individuals different, right? You've already highlighted that, but anyway, I didn't mean to digress too far into that. It was just odd that I see like a lot of people complaining about that. That there's literally this subset of people that think the reason they didn't get their allotment was because it's going to they say cartels specifically, like their allotments going to cartels. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. I think Occam's razor applies sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to cartels. It's just going to um, networks of dealers who buy a watch from Belgium and sell it in the US, or buy a watch from the UK and sell it in France. Uh, it's I don't know if I would call that cartel. I'm not sure that it can necessarily be classified as illegal either, depending on the particular situation. But it's certainly unethical, and it certainly involves the collaboration of authorized dealers with these gray markets profiteers on a through backdoor deals where it is an entire network. I mean, there's no doubt that they're doing this, and that's why I get angered with all this marketing about, we unauthorized dealer, we don't have wait lists. Get a Rolex without having to wait for a wait list. Well, excuse me, but these people are waiting because of you, not because of some inexplicable connection, not because Rolex constrains the supply. It's mostly because people, gray market dealers themselves, or flippers, getting those allocations and turning around and selling them for a profit.
So, what do you think
Not,
about things like, you have Chrono 24,
it's not a
obviously, and then you have
secret.
eBay? Like, what do you think about that perspective? Because I don't think it goes away. I think people will continue to do it, whether you have large individual gray market personalities. They'll just do it through Chrono 24 and eBay. It will be fundamentally the same problem.
But ultimately, well, it won't be the same problem. It would be a similar problem, but
Well, from the wait list problem, it will be the same problem.
if we are talking about individuals doing certain things, certainly individuals who have what dozens of watches in their collection would have a much more limited capacity to speculate than people who run by now multi-million dollar companies by having done this. So Watchbox has the luxury, for example, and I use them because it's a convenient name, not because I'm want to kind of set them aside, or I'm accusing them of something. But Watchbox has the capital to buy the entire market of Lange watches and stockpile them for the next decade. I can't do that as an individual collector. No matter how rich I am, I just don't have that kind of capital. So I think it's not even a quantitative difference. I think that's a qualitative difference. If you have companies, international companies engaged in this behavior, of course, it creates conditions of speculation that your average collector can not even make a dent on. And yes, this is a spectrum, right? There have always been collectors, some of whom became very respected experts nowadays, who have made money off buying and selling watches. But it's a spectrum, and to cross that threshold, uh, I think it changes certain things. So yes, people can speculate on Chrono 24, eBay, collectors gatherings, and other sorts of networks. but can they speculate like these global companies with millions and millions of dollars of investments to sometimes buy the entire market of a certain brand?
No, but I don't know that it's actually. I don't know if they're the source of the initial problem. Let's pick on AP, right? So I've had various types of business dealings before I pick on AP, various types of business dealing with Watchbox, and Luxury Bazaar, Pride and Pinion, right? Those three, David SW as well, right? So let's say those four, and I've been satisfied with three of the four of them, like explicitly for the purposes I had. I won't get into that, right? Um, I've also had an eBay experience and a Chrono 24 experience, and I can't say I was dissatisfied with the Chrono 24 experience. Kind of neutral on that one. I was very dissatisfied with the eBay experience, but that's different problem. Uh, but then I have to go look at the way I've been treated by AP, Vacheron, uh, Singer, for that matter, um, and a number of the official dealers, and I feel significantly more comfortable with the way I was treated by all the gray dealers, right? Uh, so there is a certain customer aspect. I actually think just,
Mm.
luxury bazaars, no wait lists, T-shirts and kind of that marketing moniker they have. I think that's brilliant from my perspective. I think that there are a lot of people that have had more than bad experiences that, for the sake of a smoother transactional experience, they would pay that difference. And this goes to, say, the Philippe Dufour model. I think that if they could get that same customer experience directly from, say, AP, Patek, Vacheron, whatever, they might just they would be like they would take that angle, and I wouldn't blame them. And I'm one of them, right? Um, if I could get that experience, a more frictionless experience at a higher premium direct from the manufacturer, I think I would prefer that, right? So I have no problem with what some of these people are doing. Now,
Mm.
the I'm not a huge fan of the intersection of a cult of personality with the market, which is a different problem, and I have that problem with, say, health pharmacies, supplements, fitness influencers, the works, right? Like, I have that problem across the board, that intersection has caused some other problems.
Mm.
Um, but I don't look at it quite as harshly as you do. I think the source of the problem is still ultimately like Rolex. I don't think the source of the problem is the gray market itself. I think the source of the problem are some of the market behaviors of Rolex, Patek, AP, Vacheron, so forth and so on. Now, what makes it really interesting to me now is that these people played with this, and because they take trades, and this is something that's been publicly discussed. People will trade in their Omegas and other watches, and to keep inventory turnover, a lot of gray market dealers are acquiring these watches that don't have good, um, say, market dynamics, right? And that becomes stock that sits. And when the market's booming, say during COVID, you can do that for a certain period of time because you could continue to move it. But now they pay dearly for it, right? They pay dearly for it.
So
So,
let's try to address that, because this is something that I Love Maldives brought up as well, because it is something Horology Ancien said, and we already touched upon it, right? Whether this short-term um, approach can negatively affect the brand value, the equity of the brands in the long term. Um, and even before getting into that, of course, what you just said and what was brought up in the discussion before was the fact that um, the secondary market can be really fickle, right? If you look at some auction results from um, late 90s and early 2000s, you would see uh, Frank Muller pieces going for insane amounts, right? It's not like that now. The brand has certainly lost a lot of equity in the meantime. So
mhm.
just because brand X is so valued and held so dearly by the secondary market, by the auction houses, by the high rolling collectors, doesn't mean that it will be in 20 years. And do you think that these kinds of brands, by having these annual price increases, having 2, 3, 6, 7 price increases a year, do you think they are, at least some of them, are digging their own grave? Do you think um, they will run into certain problems the next time the watch market um, completely crashes and burns?
Sure, absolutely, and that's the difference between when I said, with Dufour. Dufour doesn't necessarily have. He may not have a roadmap that goes to a multi-generational roadmap. He's not the Audemars and the Piguet families, right? There isn't, or the Vacheron brand. There isn't hundreds of years of provenance to fall back on. They don't have properties in museums and hotel chains and partnerships with golf and musicians and stuff, right? So for him, it may not be really a short-term damage because his whole market is short-term. For companies like Longuet and Audemars and Vacheron and even Omega that do these regular price increases, it could absolutely be catastrophic. Now, what they've done in the meantime is they've made room for a ton of interesting micro brands. They've made room for them, which was great. But then what was really weird to me is that a number of these smaller brands, not micro brands per se,
Mm.
but the ones that are in between, like the Orises of the world or the Vermonts of the world, decided that they want to compete with Omega prices. And they don't, I'm sorry, I love Vermont. I like Oris. They aren't Omega. They do not provide Omega value or Omega engineering or Omega finish. They just don't, right? At least that's my opinion. So I think those people are trying to catch up while there is a way to do it. Now, historically, a brand I'm familiar with that to a certain extent has gone through this flux and is still around is Rado. Rado has gone through this flux and has still managed to stick around. So there's a way to recover from it, right? There's going to be ebbs and flows, and you might end up being acquired, but the brand will stay around. So it's a risk maybe they're willing to take. I don't know if that works for a company like Vacheron Patek or Audemars, but or even Longuet. You might be digging your own grave. You might find yourself in a situation where you are no longer simply just looked at as part of anybody's holy trinity. Um, and frankly, like what's that expression they made in the Shrek movies? Like that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, like because you're sacrificing somebody else. I don't know that I care. Like if they do that, I would be sad with certain marks. I mean, certainly Audemars would make me sad. Bachelor would make me sad. Um, but I don't know that I care that much if they do that. Uh, if they make that mistake, but again, like I said before, some of them it may not be a mistake. Some of them may be looking at this as this market is the last time we're going to have this boom because there's a fundamental shift. We are not getting young enough buyers at scale to maintain our businesses. We are going to have to introduce, you know, like the Hermes way. You walk into Hermes boutique, Hermes has some legitimate watches, but right in front of every Hermes boutique is a ton of Apple Watch accessories, ton of them.
Right.
Right. So they may all see that, they may consider that writing on the wall definitive. And I don't know if it's definitive, to be honest with you. But it might be. And maybe that's the way to look at it. Like we're going to ratchet this up because the market's going to crash whether we ratchet it up or not. And they may think that the path, the timeline that they have, right, the runway of the crash might be effectively the same whether they ratchet the prices up or not. So this is their last decade of getting these prices.
So I'll start from, like, chronologically from the latest moment and maybe try to work my way back. um I think the Swiss watch industry realizes, and maybe the examples you gave are a symptom of this in Bremont, in Oris, and even in Omega and Tag. They realize that the smartwatch, Apple Watch, has completely cannibalized the sub 3.5 4K market. There's no way at this point in time that one can actually reverse that trend, that one can go back to a moment where you could have an entry level luxury watch at that price point. There, like you said, they're just not enough interested buyers to rejuvenate the industry from that particular point and make that the bread and butter for most um, larger scale watch manufacturing companies. And this, to me, in a way, speaks very specifically to a play that the Swiss industry, that the Swiss watchmakers did in the wake of the, or at the onset of the quartz crisis, really. They have decided that I think we may be beaten at our own game. Maybe we can't market our watches at this point as simply being precise tools of timekeeping. Um, we will not catch up to quartz technology in terms of chronometric precision, but we can focus on our craftsmanship, our artisanal touches, and the tradition, and the ability to um, market these pieces. And that came a little later on, perhaps, but was soon to follow. Um, the idea to market these timepieces as an article of a larger lifestyle, a luxury lifestyle to be specific. So now they have the hindsight, of course, decades and decades after the 70s, after some of possibly very dark times for the Swiss industry in the 70s, that has paid off for the Swiss watch market. And even in the wake of the 2008, the great, um, not the Great Depression, the Great Recession, one could still say that at least the industry had survived. They managed to survive, and they have been thriving, especially in the last few years. Now, should that necessarily inspire confidence for how the way they have started up marketing themselves will also pay off? I don't know, but it certainly is in the back of everyone's minds in the Swiss watch industry. They think, hey, it worked in the past. Let's lean very heavily on luxury, on exclusivity, on artisanal craft, and ride this as long and as hard as we can. So I do agree with you on that point, but I think there is this kind of I don't want to say this method behind that madness. I don't think they are just saying, let us just run over the abyss as fast as we can, and we might fall at some point. But more so, yeah, we can't really see ahead, but this strategy worked in the past. I don't see why it shouldn't work in the future. So let's keep
I think you may
up
be
and
right.
up.
That makes perfect sense, right? You may be right. The reason I think this is slightly different, I'm going to give you an example from my day-to-day life. So my daughter, who's 15, is probably already somewhere in the top 1% of mechanical watch collectors worldwide already, because she has an Omega, she has 2 reservoirs, right? She has a number of automatic watches. So she's probably in the top 1 to 3% of watch collectors globally already. So have a lot of family in this weekend, right? When there's a lot of family, I have a rule. The telephone doesn't come to the dinner table. Your Nintendo Switch doesn't come out of the living room. You're spending time with family. What does she do? She doesn't put her Omega on. She doesn't put her reservoir on. She puts her Apple Watch on, because connectivity is increasingly the status symbol, being totally involved and connected. And I hate that, but that's kind of what's happened. That's why you have influencers peddling millions of different brands that have millions of followers, because it does not matter anymore to a majority of them if they peddle Louboutin, Dior, or the works. What they do in private may be different, right? But the influence they have is no longer brand associated, which has also, I think, changed as counterfeiting and whatnot has changed over the past few decades as well. Um, So then my 2-year-old nephew, so today, this happened this morning. I was trying to take him out on the deck of the lake because we have these two juvenile alligators that like to sun on our deck. And he's seen them in pictures, got fairly close, but I was holding him. My little brother was with me. My father was with me. My daughter was with me. And I decided I was going to try to get a wrist shot because my brother had a Breitling on. My dad had an Omega Constellation on. My daughter had her Seamaster 57-300 on. I had the Hanabasar G-Shock. We put our wrists in the center, and he immediately, at 2-year-old, is like, I don't have anything on my wrist. Right? So when we went inside, I fashioned very quickly using one of my daughter's watches just to put a watch on his wrist. And what did he do? He started touching the glass because that's the only way he knows how to interact with anything because everything's a touch screen. Right.
I mean, look, I'm not gonna toot my own horn. I read a lot of books, but if I spend enough time on my iPad during the day, I sometimes try to do things on a paperback that I can easily do on a touch screen as well. As much as that is simply to say, as much as I understand that it basically reconfigures your entire sensorium and possibly rewires your brain, it doesn't necessarily unplug you from any idea
No, of course not. It doesn't.
The reason, again, I'm probably because I'm a pessimist, I am actually mostly agreeing with you, but I also want to say that at the end of the day, mechanical watches already are an artifact. They are a throwback. They are essentially obsolete. Time is all around us. There is a chance that the time display on my microwave and on on my oven is more accurate than my Seiko's. But these mechanical watches give us a certain kind of pleasure. We do have personal stories and sometimes collective histories and some mythological aspects to them that inspires us in a different way. There is a human interest aspect to mechanical watches always, which cannot by definition be superseded. I mean, I know we can go back very quickly. I mean, this has happened in my lifetime, right? The idea that there would be something like YouTube and there would be watch influencers with more than 1 million subscribers on YouTube and to be actually perceived as cool guys, not possible. As a watch collector, I mean, I'm already a nerd, so that doesn't help at any rate. But as a watch collector, I always had the perception whenever it came up in early 2000s that I was an anorak. I was at the same level as someone who collects stamps. Not even as cool as someone who collects original issues of the Playboy. So, I mean, the fact that this has become something like this to me means it can also quickly return to that same point, like 50 years down the line. I understand, but it will not die off. And because it won't die off, doesn't mean, of course, that every single brand will survive either, right? Today there are more manufacturers in Switzerland than the golden age of watchmaking, which preceded the quartz crisis. I think at that time there were 600 some, maybe 700 manufacturers. Now there are more than 1,000 brands, I should say. So in a way, the industry is healthier than it has ever been, more popular than it has ever been, more mainstream than it has ever been. That doesn't mean it will always stay that way. On the other hand, there is some reason to be optimistic because of how far it has come, even in our lifetime.
I do I do believe that's fair. I think my outlook for the industry is that companies like AP, Patek, and Vacheron will survive, and that the whole middle ground of companies that are between $5,000 and $15,000 won't. And I think Rolex is is going to be the whole market in the middle sphere, right? Um, and then we're going to see all the micro brands continue to come and go regularly forevermore. That's kind of where I see it happening. So I think that the endangered species right now are the tags, the Oruses, even potentially the Omegas, right? The Hublots. I think those are the endangered species in a 20 to 30 year time frame. Um, and AP, Vacheron, Patek will survive. The equivalents of Philippe Dufour, maybe in the hands of his daughter, will survive. The Longuets will survive, but then the Glashüttes and everybody else, they're the endangered species. And then the $1,500 mechanical watch market, largely dominated by ETA, ETA like movements, or that are manufactured out of China, will be the sub $1,500 range. Uh, so yeah, no, I think it's an interesting discussion from my perspective, and I still hope I'm wrong. I mean, I hope I'm entirely wrong, but I'm just looking at, you know, I'm just looking at the next generation, next two generations or three generations of kids, and I'm like, I'm just not sure, you know, that $5,000 to $15,000 market's going to have anything left for it if it
No,
doesn't
I
have a
mean,
crown on it.
I actually almost completely agree, because ultimately I think for, for the frugal enthusiast, for the young collector, for people who just have a hard time crossing over the $1,000 threshold or 1.5, there is now a constellation of different brands, where, and not only a few options, but an entire spectrum that would allow someone to build a collection. Now, I'm not, I've always been against that, right? Not that I'm against these sorts of value brands. I have a nice assortment of them, between my four Seikos and my new Merci Archie watch. Um, but I'm always skeptical of building entire collections out of these. Nevertheless, there's that option, right? There's so much there. There are, like you said, entire generations who would never even think of wearing a mechanical wristwatch, especially when they have a smartwatch. Now, that has practically already killed the sub $3.54 thousand luxury watch market. It can, like you said, probably start eating its way up, and some of the brands in the long term will simply not survive that aspiration, that mission creep, so to speak, right? The
That's
fact
a
that,
perfect phrase for it, mission creep.
yeah, I mean, like you said, Bremont and Oris are great, but they're not Omega. And I know this will not make me any friends, but Omega is not Rolex. So it shouldn't be priced like Rolex or anywhere near. Um, so on and so forth. Rolex is not Patek Philippe, and Patek Philippe is actually not that special in year 2023. But that's another discussion altogether. Um, but ultimately, yes, they have all started marketing themselves up on a consistent basis with at least two price increases every year, which obviously is going to be the end of whatever ends up in the middle. Because for people who want to work with a very limited budget or can't afford to work with a bigger budget, have so many options that use generic movements, like you said, ETA clones for the most part, or increasingly also Japanese and Chinese made movements too. And then, there are smartwatches for people who just don't care, don't even think about mechanical watches. And then there's the genuine luxury watch market, which might be, like you said, might be already creeping up to $10,000-$15,000 as the entry level, and anything below risks completely getting lost.
I don't like, I don't like where it's going, but it's definitely going there. I think it has to go there. Now, I don't know if you want to pull up that last chat, that question.
Which one?
From Poway.
But that's not Poway, and it's
no, that's why I said I don't know if you
strange
want to pull it up.
The strange thing is it doesn't appear on YouTube. It appears here, which is very strange.
You have to change in the YouTube. You have to change it from top chat to live chat.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then it appears.
It's just that. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I disavow. First off, I actually like Poway. I don't know who that is. But yeah, ultimately I wanted to say about that situation that, for the enthusiast, there's actually an embarrassment of riches at the lowest price point and highest price point. And by lowest, again, I'm not saying that they're necessarily cheap. For a lot of people, putting down even a few $100s can be a lot of money for a watch. I don't want to disregard that necessarily, but both at that sub 1.5k point and $10,000, $15,000 and up, at retail, there are more options than there has ever been. So honestly, I don't get worried too much about things that I can't change. What I can change is to sustain this platform, to build this platform, and build platforms like this where we can keep the flame alive, right? Where we can actually build a community of enthusiasts, of people who still care about mechanical watches, and who are obviously impressed with the technicality, with the engineering, with the artisanal work that goes into it, but who are interested in the human aspects of these watches, of the stories that bind the person to the watch, bind people to other people through watches, and the historical narratives that frame these sorts of individual and intersubjective connections. I think that is what we can do, because we can't, no matter what, we can't really decide or have any real effect on the pricing policies of these brands. We can discuss this for 24 hours and it will literally change nothing, and probably no one's mind either, because ultimately we are preaching to the choir. Of course, everyone thinks that the price increases this way are unconscionable, but we can develop different sorts of perspectives, and certainly there's always a great watch out there. There's always something undiscovered out there. There's always something that offers great value, especially if you start dipping your toes into vintage. And you don't even have to do that. Now we have the entire category of neo vintage, very well preserved, still very well working watches that sometimes even arrive as full sets, untouched, unworn. There's so much out there. We don't have to be beholden to AP's price increases, Rolex's Rolex authorized dealers' strange allocation practices. We don't have to, you know, stay in that particular lane. There's a whole wide world out there.
Well said. And you heard it here first. Young Brando will be talking about the watches that we love for as long as he possibly can, regardless of what happens on the market. So he will
Yes.
not be beholden to these market dynamics. I
Well,
like it, man. I like it. I think that was great.
yeah, I'm not saying I'm, you know, I mean, look, something larger would happen in the world, and, you know, we would be talking about anything but watches. Who knows? I wouldn't say that. But
Yeah,
yes,
well, God forbid, but
yeah.
you're not wrong.
Jack says, as a young, okay, let's start with your friend Mikey, since he super chatted $5. Thank you.
Mikey.
Yeah, yeah, man. Probably the deepest thinking I've done all week. LOL. Have a good night, everyone. Good night to you, my friend
He's a
Mikey.
good guy. He's a good guy.
Love you, man. Thank you. Yeah, you know, I try, and it's even better when I have a good interlocutor who is always self-effacing and you know, talks in very negative terms about himself. But I actually like this guy. Um, I think, Ali, whenever you come to this channel, much like I appreciate, you know, Aussie expats, much like I appreciate the professor, much like I appreciate some of the other recurrent characters on this channel. Um, I like seeing you here, and we always have a great conversation. So thank you for.
I appreciate you letting me come decrease the value and the intellect of your stream. I really enjoyed here, though.
Stop saying stuff like that. Jack says, as a young watch collector, my first quote unquote watch was a now discontinued green Seiko SNK for 120. Seiko 5s on Amazon Prime, I think, are a great option over the overpriced department store choices. Yeah, I have my, you know, they were not my first watches by any stretch of imagination, but I love my Seiko SKX pieces. I love my King Turtle. I love my Seiko 5 Rowing Blazers piece. Um, I love these kinds of pieces. I adore the design of my Merci, the Archiwatch LMM01. Um, I think there's a lot of value out there if you want to buy these kinds of newer pieces. It's not only dive watches anymore. There's a whole spread of affordable pieces, vintage inspired, classic design, or more modernist and refreshing takes um, from all these micro brands, smaller independents perhaps that use generic movements. But yeah, Seiko is a mainstay. I mean, you can hardly go wrong with Seiko. It's not going to be at that entry level a chronometer by any stretch of imagination, but you will love the hell out of that watch. And he says, thanks for helping me settle on the SPB 143, ordered and on its way. I think that's an amazing, amazing watch.
Seiko's kind of an unsung hero of the past few decades, right? More so
Mm.
than say Citizen and some of the other, some of their contemporaries. Seiko is kind of an unsung hero with what they did for a few decades of value, of reliable, and across every style spectrum, right? Um, they did well. They did well.
Yeah, and also, pardon me, the thing is, of course, Seiko is, pardon me again, Seiko is oftentimes cast as the villain in the story of the mechanical watch, right? You know,
Yeah.
they are the baddies who came up and industrialized quartz powered movements. On the other hand, you know, if you look at how the online communities of enthusiasts on a broader scale have thrived, have expanded, have grown since early 2000s, it's been through Seikos. Of course, there was always, like, Purist Pro and whatever else, that kind of um, very well heeled elite, if not elitist, forums of collectors. Of course, there were always Rolex forums, Omega forums in all languages of the world, for sure. But the global community of watch enthusiasts, especially English speaking watch enthusiasts, really came together with the kind of energy that was generated by fun, accessible, and wearable pieces that you could buy from Seiko at $200 a pop, basically. Um, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. If I'm not saying they necessarily saved the industry. I always hate those kinds of narratives, but the energy they injected into the mechanical watches for the first 2 decades of the 21st century, I think, is underestimated.
I totally agree. I actually made this case to somebody, a friend of mine, who's part of the also very big like EDC type of person, right? So the past decade, we've seen this massive surge of companies that make backpacks and heavy cordura and stuff for hunting and for EDC, and you've seen 511 and Kafaru and a million of these companies come, but there was a period of time where the only thing you can do was buy a JanSport and customize it, right? And when people saw how much that was going on, right, then it created the market. It created new market players, new space in the market, and it forced some of the old contemporaries to change their ways. And I think Seiko very much did that. So it's not necessarily saving the market, but they forced the market to become more agile and evolve. And I appreciate that. I absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, actually. Speaking of which, by the way, there is a reservoir watch on the Only Watch. Did you see
Yeah,
that?
I did see it.
What do you
I'm
think? I
happy.
want to bring it up. I want to
I'm
bring it up.
happy. Yeah, so I'm happy that they did it. Because their prior only watch entry and recently they've been doing kind of whimsical cartoon watches, right? They've had the various Mortimer cartoon, they've had the Popeye cartoon. I propose that they should do one Asterix and Obelix since that's a French mainstay. But I appreciate the fact that they did something. It's still a retrograde, but they built their module, but they did something notably different than their existing line. And I would really like to see them bring something very similar to market. Um,
Mm,
I happen to love retrogrades, and I do like
me
the
too.
automotive inspiration of a big chunk of the reservoir line. And I own two of them, or now my daughter owns two of them because I'm never getting them back. Uh, and the case is, the Tiffenmeister case. So, they did a little bit of engineering preservation there. So I really like this, but it's because I really like reservoir. Uh, and I do hope they bring something very similar to market.
Wait, tell me what they did with the Tiefenmesser case. What is so unique about that particular case?
No, it's just bronze, right? It's not terribly unique. But I
Mhm.
appreciate that they continue to use a bronze case in the application of a tourbillon here. It has, a vintage vibe, and I personally do like the way bronze patinas and ages. Um, that's so there's nothing terribly unique about the case, right? They don't add anything, like Vermont triptych. They don't do anything. They just add their modules, which are very well developed, at least in my experience. They handle a hell of a beating, um, uh, and I just like the case. And they reused it here. So, and in the context of what I'm saying it here is, it makes me optimistic they could introduce this to the market, right? these smaller makers can't take too many gambles all at once. So if they have an existing stock of these cases and they can adapt their modules and fit in, obviously, a new retrograde tourbillon, then great. It saves them development money to bring these watches to market.
And of course, I mean, it's I think, in addition to bronze, I think it's also, I mean, depth rating or depth measure. That's what it means in German. I'm assuming it's also part of the aesthetic. You said part of it is racing inspired. These are, I think,
These are
more
inspired by
nautical
submarines.
and submarine inspired.
So I have
by the way, did you
one
hear,
racing Expire and one submarine inspired reservoir watch.
did you hear we had that long-standing rumor confirmed by Periscope, by Jose Perez as well, that it is in fact submariner, not submariner.
Yeah, people have scolded me for that for years, and it's just I can't get it out of my system. Like I read it the same way, no matter what. But yeah, people have told me that for years. I've known it. I'm sorry, I refuse to do it.
No, that's okay. I think it's a pedantic detail, and I love being pedantic. So it's I'm glad that it's finally confirmed that I can sound as pretentious as I like a submarine. But yeah, I like the aesthetic, and I like jump hour watches. I like retrograde minutes. That's one of the reasons that pulled me into getting the Janta Retrosport jump hour piece. So I really like this, and they collaborated with Telos, which is a movement manufacturer from La Chaux-de-Fonds, who made them the tourbillon. I'm given to understand. And it's a unique combination between a bronze case and a grand feu enamel dial on the regulator type part, with the retrograde minutes, which I'm sure they don't use enamel dials in their production models. That seems very unique as a combination. And I completely agree with you about bronze. I think we are making similar statements tonight, but you can't wear a linen shirt and complain about the fact that it wrinkles, right?
Yeah.
You want a bronze watch, you buy it, and you can nurture that patina a certain way. You can there are ways to control it using certain solutions, etc., and certain kinds of cleaning, but it is going to patinate in a certain way, and that's why you get a bronze cased watch. If you don't like that, you don't get a bronze cased watch. Just like, if you don't like wrinkles, you don't get linen or cotton suits. You get something that doesn't wrinkle as easily. So I never understood the way people complain about bronze watches that they would never buy and never use. I just don't get it. I really like this submarine aesthetic.
And the rotor, right? This is a new rotor for them as well. They actually have the lever, stages on the rotor. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I do like this unique combination of a bronze case with grand feu enamel dial, which I don't think I've ever seen before. And again, sometimes a lot of brands do their firsts here, and sometimes you say like, yeah, okay, so what? Oh, we never used a titanium case before. We never matched a blue dial with this kind of case before, etc. That seems a little lame, but in this case, it also feels very unique, and something I certainly, from my standpoint, from my experience, have never seen. So let's read their description. Reservoir proudly presents its very first in-house tourbillon in collaboration with Telos Watch, a major technical step change for the emerging and independent brand, achieved with the collaboration of the renowned movement manufacturer from La Chaux-de-Fonds, that's Telos, Reservoir strategic partner since its earliest days. The unique crafted piece takes inspiration from nautical measuring instruments of the last century, with a typical display like the depth gauge aboard submarines. Encapsulated in a bronze case, it displays a regulator type enamel Grand Feu dial, a blue hand for the retrograde minutes at 240 degrees and jumping hours, last both being part of the brand's aesthetic signature. The unique Swiss-made watchmaking savoir-faire of Telos Watch is demonstrated by the imposing presence of a tourbillon at 6 o'clock, featuring 437 pieces and 46 stones. Beating at 4 hertz and powered by a double barrel, it offers 60 hours of power reserve. The caseback reveals, like you said, Ali, an exclusive oscillating weight engraved with indications found on chat burns from old submarines. 43 millimeters of a bronze case, a white camphor enamel dial, a tourbillon, which I'm thinking is a 1 minute tourbillon, and quite a cool piece. And I like the fact that this particular dial design makes it look like it's floating. You know, the regulator part, the
Yeah,
jump
yeah,
out slash retrograde part, it looks like it's floating a little bit. So it's
yeah.
quite cool.
Yeah, I think this is a cool watch. I don't. I mean, I think it's beautiful. It's not beautiful in the same way some of the other pieces in Only Watch are. Right? It has an industrial beauty to it. I really like.
Yeah.
Also, in my head, a proper nautical themed watch is where every tourbillon should be.
What do you mean? Say it again.
Tourbillon, right? It's to fight gravity. So in my head,
Mhm.
tourbillon also the weightlessness of water. Right?
Mm.
There's a certain romance to that I like to see tourbillons applied well in nautical themed watches.
Hmm. That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. But certainly here, that combination is unique too. I'm sure it's been done before. I'm not arguing that in this case, but you don't see every day with jump hour watches a tourbillon, which is a very interesting aesthetic because a lot of um, you know I don't think this is the case here, although I'm sure there could be a little bit of a roundabout way of telling time. But combining, jump hour, retrograde minute hand with a 1 minute tourbillon in a good design, that would be a stunning wristwatch because you also have your seconds basically. And imagine, if that is so precise that, everything jumps right on the second, right? That the hand snaps back to zero, that becomes three exactly at 59:59 snap, right? So that would be actually a quite great piece.
I'd love to see it come to market. I did think it's odd that they actually do list it on their website for 60,000 US. Like you can add it to cart on their website, but it says it's for Only Watch. It's a unique piece, so I don't know what that means. So maybe they are, do intend to bring it to market in some form or another.
Probably that's very encouraging, by the way. I mean, it is a lot of money for um you know for that, but then again, it is a pretty unique piece in the sense that it's not one of a kind, perhaps in the sense that it may have been done before, but you don't see jump hour retrograde minute watches combined with a tourbillon on an everyday basis. So it is a pretty unique piece.
Yeah, I love this. I love this.
Estimate is 50,000 to 60,000 in Swiss francs. This is lot number 48. Were there any other watches that we didn't necessarily discuss and that you wanted to go through?
I know that you previously discussed the Anderson Genève. I really did like that watch as well.
Which one?
The Anderson Genève.
Mm-hmm.
I really did enjoy that watch as well. I do think the the Moser MBNF collaboration with the Panda is adorable, but adorable, not not my bag. The Bivet is weird to me. Like I don't get it. So I don't know. I think my favorite watch in the whole thing is probably the Anderson Genève. But there are a couple that I could definitely choose from that are up there.
Wait, I want to pull up Biva and
You scroll past the Biver.
yeah.
Yeah. It is. I think it was on the second row, second from the left. Third row, second from the left. There you go, right under the AP. No visible indication of time on the front.
Let's see. So Catharsis, a unique interpretation of the minute repeater Carillon Tourbillon with no visible display of time. Made of titanium, the piece combines unusual handcrafts with a unique type of invisible gem setting, stone, marqueterie, and guilloche. Okay. Does it have a display of time on the back?
It looks like it does, but I still don't know how to read the time it's displaying on the back.
I mean, there's minutes, I guess, right?
Exactly. I don't know. That's the thing, is I have no idea, like, what I'm actually.
So what does the description say? Probably some pseudo.
It just says an hour hand is located on the back, but I don't know.
Ah, okay.
Right. I mean, I that's it. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, it was.
Ah, okay. So I mean, it's a minute repeater after all. So you want to know the time, you chime it. Fair enough. I mean, again, it's not my jam necessarily, but I get the point. You know, if there can be a watch that is not a traditional display of time or even an innovative display of time, that it needs to have at least one hand to keep the time and for the chiming functions to sound out that time. It makes sense. I don't like it, but it makes sense.
Yeah, this feels way too much like turning on my phone screen to look at the time.
Yeah,
like time on demand sort of thing. I don't know. Just definitely not for me. And clearly, I mean, they said it. I think they said it was made for like at the behest of an artist friend. So this is somebody who definitely has more artistic inclination and understanding than I do.
So this is how they present it. What is it about time that fascinates, if not obsesses, humans? Forever we try to interpret it, understand it, and sometimes even master it. Watches for us have always had this dual property of, on the one side, showing us we are well and alive in this time, all the whilst indicating our own time passing and slowly running out. The present watch was an idea from an artist friend who once told me, make me a minute repeater with no hands, no indices. I want to have time at my disposal. I love they wrote it in capitals because I can basically see Biva talking this sentence, and he always, of course, he has no chill. He always has the screaming voice. I want to have time at my disposal. Seems evident, yet truly represents the intricate relation a watch can have with its owner. By the way, I apologize for exploding your eardrums if you were listening to this in the form of a podcast and with headphones. God bless you. I'm not responsible for the loss of hearing caused. End of disclaimer. The singularity of this minute repeater, Carillon Tourbillon, allows to have the time without looking at it. The concept is to replace it with a true work of art that enhances the timepiece. On the back, there's an hour hand for the watch to keep a visual display of time that can be seen through the sapphire case back. It is waterproof to 50 meters so that it can be worn without worrying about the circumstances. Yeah. So, yeah, now I get it at least, right? So you only look at that painting basically, or rather work of art, because it combines a number of different arts on the dial, including gem setting, stone marqueterie, and guilloche. So you just admire that, and when you need to know the time, you just slide that thing on the right flank and listen to it. I don't like it. I don't hate it. But I finally understand it.
I think hate's a strong word. I'm not sure I would say I hate it, but I think I dislike it thoroughly.
That may be the dictionary definition of hate, but by all means, the lot 10 Viva Catharsis has a pre-auction estimate of 500,000 to 700,000 Swiss francs.
That's nuts. That I like. Go for it. You're gonna go all the way.
Right. I mean, I think the Viva pieces that they just released were already 600,000
Yeah.
US dollars. And then there was like a diamond set version that was twice that, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's not surprising that a pre-auction estimate for something like that would be still at that level. Going back to lot one, since they listed everything alphabetically, obviously I like Andes Saint Genève. We were just talking about our shared love of jump hour pieces. This, of course, doesn't actually have retrograde minutes. It displays the minutes on that railroad track on a subsidiary dial at the conventional 6 o'clock. I kind of like the two-tone approach, where you have a platinum case with pink gold accents. I don't necessarily know what to do with the fact that they have taken what was perhaps most special about their jump hour dials, where you had that, mystical or magical lozenge, they call it, like that special guilloche pattern with blued gold. It's just, to as much as I love onyx, and it's not just a black lacquer dial, it has more texture, more striations in that sense. I feel that's a loss, and it's an interesting move. It's a flex for sure, that we are going to do a special watch, but we are going to give up on what is most special to us. So I can see it from that perspective. I'm not sure if it helps their case, even though it otherwise looks like a very elegant piece.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. I do look at this as a nice sibling entry.
Yeah. Well, maybe they are trying to encourage their collectors and potential buyers to do different things with their watches, because one of Andersen's main appeals is, of course, the fact that they they allow you to customize the hell out of every single watch. So they are basically trying to show, hey, these are all the different things we can do, including semi-precious stone dials. But look at this, for example. This is the one I tried at Asbury in New York. I mean,
Oh man.
they did this. They do it like with a pink gold dial. They have done it with a yellow gold dial, and in each case, it's such a multifaceted and stunning piece that I'm not sure if I would want to swap this out if I ever ordered a jump hour piece from them with onyx of all things.
The choice of onyx, yeah. I mean, an interesting tiger's eye might have been. I don't know. The choice of onyx. I don't know. Maybe. I still really, really like it. But what you're saying is absolutely. I mean, it's dead on. There's no way to debate that. It does take away. It does. Not take away. They lost something in the subtle changes they made.
Yeah, and honestly, again, I just think this watch looks beautiful too. I just know Andersen offers something even more special.
And
And
that's the fundamental problem, right? It's because of where it's coming from.
it looks extremely handsome. So I'm not even saying something negative. It's just like, yeah, they can do something different as well, I guess. That's all I can say. Because that kind of guilloche dial with the particular blued gold, um, that's basically only them. Um, so that's just my small point of contention when it comes to lot one, which has an estimated value of 40,000 to 50,000. And honestly, it is really a stunning watch. And you can see um, on the back that blued ring that frames the movement, and uh, a very nice and complicated gear pattern on the oscillating weight of the rotor as well. And the movement has been perfected, and it is precisely jumping. By the way, everyone, I posted the link there in the chat. So if you want us to pull up any particular pieces that we didn't discuss in this show, that you want us to highlight again, feel free to send in the lot number. What else did you say, Ali, that you wanted to see or talk about at least?
I
I don't
think
want to
those
talk.
two. I think those two were the ones that I didn't get a chance to discuss with you. And then the reservoir, which you called out. Nothing else really. I mean, the Moser the Moser MBNF collab with the Panda, I think
Oh,
it's
that's it.
adorable, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's it's just adorable. That's it, really.
Where
Uh,
is that? This?
no, no, on all the way to the right, and I think it's up a few rows. There you go, the Panda.
Okay.
So
What is
there's
that?
better pictures of it elsewhere. I don't. Um, But the also REG has a pair of headphones that look exactly like that. We call them the coconuts.
Okay.
I just thought it was
Per-
cute.
a unique performance art piece featuring MBNF, hosted by Ashmosea Company, a DJ master set imbued with the DNA of both brands. Discover the Streamliner Pandemonium. It's another troll shit by Mose, isn't it?
Oh my god, that reaction's fantastic.
I
Oh.
mean, the thing is, again, like, the proportion of my anger is usually, you know it's related to my admiration for the brand, because like they have the perpetual one, beautiful. I hate the streamliner as a design, especially on that tacky bracelet, but the chronograph movements in it, the Agengraph, is an amazing movement. um like their time only watches too, I like a lot of them, I think, from a design perspective, but when they do things like this, I just I don't understand. I guess they realize that they need to do something to draw attention, otherwise the market is too tight and competitive. I guess that's the only justification. Just making good watches is not enough.
It, it, it is a bit of a troll. It's adorable. That's all I said about it was it's adorable. I do think it's adorable, but it's like okay. I even said
The
I'm not sure I really want to talk about it. It's adorable, but it is a troll. You're right.
It says when Maximilian Büsser and Edouard Meylan pool their creativity, okay, it makes a lot of noise, respectively, at the head of MBNF and H. Moser Company. These two passionate entrepreneurs never do things by halves. On the strength of their previous collaboration, which enjoyed a resounding success, Maximilian and Edouard wanted to repeat the experience, this time for the benefit of the fight against Duchenne muscular dystrophy, conducted by Only Watch. For this sophomore collaboration, just as in 2020, the two brands' universes are being mixed to create something truly unprecedented. And I'm going to bring the 2020 watch up too, because I don't remember what it was actually. For the duration of a unique and exceptional piece featuring a one-off movement developed exclusively for this occasion, MBNF and H. Moser and Company synchronize their beats to the same tempo and invite the public to an artistic performance led by a miniature panda DJ. Yeah, it's even worse than I imagined.
Your reaction is classic.
Those
Oh,
familiar with Only Watch will remember appearances of a panda character in previous Only Watch pieces by MBNF. Yeah,
I
that's.
again personally, I just think it's adorable. But yeah, your reaction.
I mean, what is it? I'm still puzzled. But like, is this actually a timepiece? It isn't. So
Um,
why is it part of a watch auction?
there were better there were better pictures elsewhere. I mean, I think it does tell time, but that's about the most I can say about it. Let me see if I can find the pictures I was thinking of.
This is the 2020 watch. MBNF horological machine number 10, Panda for Only Watch.
I think going from the Viver to this, your reactions between the two, fantastic. That's worth the price of admission alone. Can't find those better.
No,
Can't
no,
find
this
it.
is just an MBNF. Wait, let me see. Hmm.
I can't find there was a picture I sent. It might have been on Instagram.
Let's check that out.
But I can't find it at the moment.
Yeah, they just have that poster. Amazing.
Your reaction's fantastic though, between like moving from one watch to the next. That was great. I didn't expect that at all. Do not troll young Brando with your not watches.
Man, look, I mean, it's I still don't understand. It's also, I think, what, 300,000 to 400,000 Swiss francs is the pre-auction estimate for lot 28, which is H Mosa and MBNF Streamliner Pandemonium.
It has a 3-dimensional manual caliber with an undisclosed hours of power reserve.
And see that clever pun they did there, because it's not pandemonium, it's pandemonium.
Yeah.
Ali. I don't know if you noticed that. I don't know if you noticed how
but
clever they are.
But I can tell that just makes you hate them more.
Of course, because it's not clever. It's just stupid.
Oh my god, that's so fantastic. Oh, I have to find more watches like this to make you pull up just for these reactions. Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
I stand by what I said. I think it's adorable. But
sure.
not for me. That's fantastic. All right, buddy. It's my nephew's going to be up in like 4.5 hours, so I've got to figure out a way to wind down.
Of course, man.
And then
thank you for being here. I appreciate you as always.
I always enjoy being here. I really I enjoy subscribing to both of your subscription models. The newsletter, as promised yesterday, if you watched the show yesterday, there was some Breguet information came across in our mailbox. And if you're really patient, he will troll you directly with watches he thinks you should buy, because he does not mind spending other people's money. I thought that was great when you started sending me listings from me specifically. That was fantastic. So the Breguet Daniel Roth stuff, there was a private stream and some watches as promised yesterday.
Yeah,
I think it's well worth the investment.
Honestly, I love all of those too. You know, that's that's the thing. I do, of course, think more broadly. You know, because in Patreon, you know, of course, I would love to have a larger group, but the fact that I have 6 people whose tastes I know, whose pieces that I more or less know, you know, I might not know everything in your collection, but I have an idea. I curate the pieces like that, but 9 times out of 10, money were no object, I would buy every single watch that I talk about on Patreon, and you know, those keep trickling now to YouTube members. Of course, Ali gifted 15 memberships on the day they were introduced. I think there's still 1 or 2 that are to go around. So if you haven't yet, please do allow gifts on the channel, which will give you an entire month of trial membership for absolutely free. And I believe it only renews on your initiative.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't automatically renew. You have to go in and do it. You've already uploaded a number of members only videos from, you know, the quote unquote archives.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think it's well worth it. These are, I mean, in the context of our conversation earlier, these type of discussions will become increasingly rare, right? And they're, you're not going to find many places where you can have them online. And if you're outside of New York and you can't go to, local events, it's going to be tough to have these conversations at all shortly. So it is nice to have that outlet. And while JJ's is still my home, I can't have multiple many hours of these type of conversations anywhere else. So I certainly appreciate that about your channel.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. I will catch up with you again. I'm sure sooner than I intend. I didn't intend to be online tonight, but I needed to get it out of my system. And
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're always welcome.
have a good night to you and your audience. Take care, Ross.
Thank you so much, Ali. As I mentioned, it's always a great pleasure to have Ali. He is a great conversationalist. I think he has a very strong and unique perspective on a lot of issues that relate to watches. I'm sure about a lot more, although we didn't really get to talk much about anything else in the past. But I would love to do that at some point as well. I wanted to look at a few more pieces before I sign off for the night, and feel free to direct my attention to anything if you insist, whether I talked about them over the last 2 days or today. I don't mind going back. Yeah, let's start from the beginning and see if I missed anything, because I have in the past. Yeah, let's do number 14, which is Breguet. This is their world timer, Oramundi, in their sports watch case, which is the Marine, the luxury sports watch. It's an instant jump time zone watch with mechanical memory. Let's see what that means. As exclusive mechanical complication on with an instant jump time zone display, this technical feat is accomplished with the pusher and the crown having selected the first city's time and dates. The owner of the watch needs only to set the second city. The watch mechanism then calculates the time and date by means of a clever system of cams and hammers and an integrated differential. At that point, simply pressing the pusher is enough to travel from one end of the planet to the other, all without disturbing the accurate running of the watch. So basically, because when someone says instant jump time zone watch, you would say, hey, isn't that what every single watch does? Because you just click that pusher, or use a slide, or use an additional crown to cycle through different time zones 1 hour at a time. That being said, here the mechanism allows you to set the first time zone and then coordinate it with the time zone in another city, and then you can basically, at the push of a button, completely change the hour hand through from one city to another. So you're essentially traveling from one place to another, which is a very unique mechanism. I haven't seen it elsewhere, although that's of course, is not be all and all. So once you coordinate your primary time zone with the secondary city, your first city with the second city, your home and your travel destination, you can simply press the pusher and the time will automatically change into time in that second time zone without disturbing the accurate running of the watch. Another key feature of the Ora Mundi is the 2D dial. This one offers a fascinating interpretation of the world on the wrist by a play on materials and superimposed plates, which gives depth to the dial. The first gold base is composed by hand-guilloché waves. An additional sapphire plate displays the luminescent gold hour markers along with the engraved and varnished navy blue continents. For this special edition, and as a reminder that the planet never sleeps, multiple bright rose gold dots stand out on Earth. Finally, an external flange holds the various elements present on the dial. It's pretty cool. It's a good looking watch, and I'm glad they preserved that unique wave pattern on the dial, which is engine turned by hand. They have used a lighter shade of blue to execute that. I believe there's also, am I missing that? I believe that what you're seeing there at around 4 o'clock, the watchmaker's 4, is a day and night indicator with the sun and moon exchanging places, essentially. They have preserved the movement's aesthetic with a rotor that has the look of a ship's wheel and the bridge plates that are decorated like a boat deck as well, rather than the usual Côte de Genève. I think I could have done without the extra red accents, you know, behind the hour markers and on the hands and etc. I think that puts it kind of one little bits over the top for me. But other than that, I think this is a very tasteful watch that I could certainly see as a normal production piece as well. And it's quite impressive that you could instantaneously jump from one city to another, one time zone to another, in a system that takes into account the date as well, right? You know, for example, right now it's July 1st here, but it's already July 2nd in London. So if I were to coordinate Los Angeles and London, I would just press the button, and suddenly from 11:21 p.m. July 1st, I would change into 7:21 a.m. on July 2nd. That's the date indicator right under 12 o'clock there. So it's a pretty nifty mechanism. It's a handsome watch overall, even though I could do again without those red accents. This is lot 14, the Breguet Marine Oramundi 5555, with an estimated value of 70 to 80,000 Swiss francs. Jack, you should specify if you could. Do you mean in general, just as an object to appreciate, whether we would wear them, or, and what do you consider high jewelry, to be honest? Because there are, of course, categories for that. Let's say when the yearly gala of the Grand Prix is held in Geneva, Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève, and it is going to happen in November. There are, of course, a number of different categories, and in addition to, ladies' watch, ladies' complication watch, so on and so forth, there is actually an entire separate category for a jewelry piece. Something like this, for example. This was the Bulgari Serpenti Misteriosi that won the jewelry prize last time. Pardon me. If you mean watches like that, yeah, I kind of like them, but they have to have a timekeeping aspect, right? And this certainly does. It's very discreet. It might seem very secondary, but it's there, and it can be actually popped out and by the way, taken out. That's a beautiful thing about the Serpenti. It's they actually come out of the snake's mouth, so to speak. Please hit the like button, by the way, if you haven't already. It makes a huge difference for a channel of this size, and I really appreciate it. I want to look at the Chapek piece and the De Béthune next to it. This is an interesting piece. Place Vendôme, Complicité, Courage Every Second. Chapek's unique and open work reinterpretation of a double escapement combination initially created in 1830 and very rare in wristwatches. Two independent escapements beat at their own pace, with any rate variations balanced by a differential, all beautifully featured on the dial side. And the piece also has basically the colors of the rainbow in the form of a downward facing crescent, largely the top half of the dial, in Chanlevé enamel, using the color palettes of Only Watch 2023, which is basically colors of the rainbow, circular satin polished brass flange, for the Rejo, with Chapec's only watch Courage Every Second signature. This is the dial, which is entirely open worked with a grenet finish and partially skeletonized short hands with super luminova tips. A stainless steel case matched with an alligator strap and a pin buckle. Sapphire case back, of course. And it is largely a sketch here, but it's quite visible and understandable. The caliber 8 for this movement, which is, as mentioned, double escapement movement, is actually developed in collaboration with Bernhard Lederer. "72 hours of power reserve with an indication. Hand beveling on bridges and main plate, 18 interior angles, and 6 settings in gold chaton. This is the differential that regulates or balances the two separate escapements, which are at the lower half of the dial. The power reserve indicator is at 6 o'clock, center sweep seconds. The description is a little more detailed. The idea of the watch was born in 2018 as an evolution of Chapec's renowned initial models, Quai de Berg and Place Vendôme. The beauty of the concept was to respect the position of the escapements at 4:30 and 7:30 and have them connect to the differential at 12 o'clock. Xavier, Chapec's CEO, couldn't find a watchmaking partner able to respect this architecture with the differential at 12 o'clock as a central element of the concept. So the idea was left aside until a story of family and friendship brought it back to life. Paul, one of Xavier's children, was in the same school class in Neuchâtel as the daughter of Bernhard Lederer, and a mutual friend introduced the two fathers. This encounter led to an intense exchange of ideas and advices. While Xavier was focused on product and branding, Bernhard focused on pure watchmaking. They began talking about making a watch together, resolved the problem of the dual escapement running around the center, and both a friendship and a watch, complicité, were born. The only watch piece was designed even before Chapec finalized the designs for the production models of the newest addition to its Place Vendôme collection. This one-of-a-kind piece is cased in steel rather than precious metals of the production models, and the dial is encircled by a chanlevé enamel ring in the colors of Only Watch 2023. So this is in fact a model that they're introducing in collaboration with Bernhard Lederer into their lineup. It is going to be a version of Place Vendôme with the double escapement and a differential at 12 o'clock. This particular version is uniquely encased in stainless steel and framed with that Chanlevé enamel decorated ring at lot 19. The pre-auction estimate of the piece is 80 to 100,000 in Swiss francs. Lot 20 is De Bethune DW Seeking Perfect. That was the name of the documentary that Waco filmed at their manufacturer, wasn't it? DW5 SP Seeking Perfect is one of a kind forged piece, the metal of the case specifically made from the iron ore found just a stone's throw from the De Bethune manufacturer. This unique watch comes from the depths of time, its dial and spherical moon made of ferrous meteorite created in the crucible of the universe. Some of these descriptions are really going above and beyond. Denis Flageolet got as close to nature as possible, seeking to rediscover ancestral iron and steel making techniques. He forged the various parts from a magnifying glass of metal made in his own blast furnace. The patterns on its surface come from different parts of his metal preparation, which he forged together. Denis Flageolet created this mass of iron and steel from iron ore harvested at L'Auberson, which is their hometown, which is where the Bethune manufacturer is based. He roasted it, crushed it into powder, reduced it through the glowing charcoal of his low furnace to obtain a mass of metal, then forged it into a compact material close to the shape to be machined. The operation took several weeks to complete, and the research took many months. For this unique timepiece, the De Bethune team created a tourbillon movement that can be admired on the back of the watch. So basically, on the front, you see the spherical moon phase, and on the back, you have the tourbillon. You have basically two discs for the hour and minutes. As you can see, this is 4:44, and the spherical moon phase. That is polished blue meteorite. The pin buckle is in polished grade 5 titanium. The case is again in Damascus iron and steel from Auberson iron ores. Blued meteorite dial, spherical meteorite moon, QR code engraved on the back of the piece giving access to information for the future owner, and blue sapphire cabochon on the crown, as you can see. Yeah, very unique piece. I actually kind of appreciate this, even though, again, it's absolutely not my style, but certainly very impressive. I love how those blue accents go with the hand-forged case. This is lot 20, De Bethune DW5 Seeking Perfect. The piece has a pre-auction estimate of 220,000 to 270,000 in Swiss francs. We have a couple more watches that I want to look over before I close for tonight. I want to take a look at Lederer's other piece. And Ulysse Nardin and Laurent Ferrier, basically. So let's start with lot 36, Laurent Ferrier, Sport Auto on Track. I love Laurent Ferrier, and I love the micro rotor movements on their watches with the natural escapement. I especially love the Galet square design. I'm not a huge fan of their sports watch. I don't really appreciate the TV shaped case design, which is not a big deal, but it's really not my thing. It's not my jam. With the creation of the new Sports Auto on Track, Laurent Ferrier decided to pay tribute not only to Only Watch's colorful and vibrant theme, but also its founding history associated with the world of motor racing. As you guys might know, the two partners in the brand, namely Laurent Ferrier and François Servanant, actually were involved in motorsports, and in fact, they took part in the 24 hours of Le Mans and came third place in that famous race where Paul Newman had placed second. So a very interesting history there. Of course, Laurent Ferrier was involved with the industry for decades before he established his own brand, and most famously was the head of creations department at Patek Philippe, which is just a fancy way of saying design. He is understood to be the father, the progenitor of the Aquanauts as a design, as a derivation from, as an iteration of the Nautilus, which is, of course, the original Janta design. And I am, as mentioned, a great fan of his brand. Once again, Laurent Ferrier is proud to support Only Watch for the 10th edition. This is the 10th edition of the Only Watch. For this occasion, Laurent Ferrier has created a unique timepiece that embodies the history of the brands. They have long been involved with motor racing since François Servanant and Laurent Ferrier, the two founders, joined forces in the 1970s to take part in the 24 hours of Le Mans. Their friendship, forged on the track, led to the creation of the brand. This new, unique, and distinctive dial features charcoal gray gradient shades that resemble the appearance of asphalt. On the outer edge of the dial, a track pattern alternating yellow and blue acts as a boundary for the dial, evoking the speed bumps delimiting the bends in the racetrack. The hour circle is surrounded by a green transfer. Finally, The white small second dial is combined with the tone-on-tone indication OW appears to indicate the finish line or the very objective of the race played on this unique timepiece. While bearing witness to the power of encounters and passions, the sport auto on track is a tribute to both the rich history of Laurent Ferrier and that of Only Watch. The case and bracelet are made out of grade 5 titanium. And the movement is self-winding with a 72-hour power reserve. The piece has a diameter of 41.5 millimeter and a thickness of 12.7. This is lot 36, Laurent Ferrier, Sports Auto on Track, which has an estimated value of 55,000 to 85,000 Swiss francs. Oh. Okay, so I will do Ulysse Nardin and then move to this is lot 59, Ulysse Nardin, Freak S Only Watch, unique iteration of the Freak S launched in 2022. In order to celebrate the 10th edition of the Only Watch, Ulysse Nardin Manufacture and Design Studio have created a colorful interpretation of the UN 251 caliber based on the rainbow color palettes. True to the Freak collection principles, the micromechanical machinery featured in the Freak S is a carousel with no hands, no dial, and no crown. The Freak S indicates the time thanks to the rotation of its own movements. Two bridges rotate around its center. They respectively indicate the hours and minutes. And an arrow shows the hours, while the nose cone of the spaceship indicates the minutes. So the movement travels around the dial. The nose of the spaceship shows the minutes. And the arrow shows the hours. Whereas in traditional tourbillon, the balance wheel makes one rotation per minute within a cage, in the Freak S, it's the whole movement, including its regulating organ, that makes a complete turn on itself in 1 hour. The Freak S, the Freak S time is set by rotating the bezel in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. So that is the winding of the watch. The Freak S incorporates the following innovations: a double oscillator in silicon, a double escapement in diamond sill, a vertical differential, and a grinder automatic winding system, twice as efficient as a traditional winding system. I love that this watch has not only rainbow, but also grinder as its automatic winding system. Very suggestive indeed. Freak S Only Watch is an exclusive interpretation of this timepiece, featuring two plates, one indicating the unique edition, one in one in place of the crown, and one Only Watch on the opposite side. This masterpiece features Only Watch's signature 2023 colors: red, pink, blue, green, yellow, and orange tones enhance this watch, making it impressive and eye-catching. As you can see, there are the inscriptions: Freak, Only Watch, and on the other side, it also says 1 out of 1. .45 millimeters with a 13.66 case thickness. This is lot 59. Ulysse Nardin Freak S Only Watch with a pre-auction estimate of 160,000 to 200,000 Swiss francs, with a black ceramic upper case and black DLC titanium case, bezel, side plates, and locker. Black DLC open sapphire case back. And the bracelet is a blue ballistic rubber strap, like a textured rubber strap, with a black DLC / black ceramic déployant buckle. Last but not least, please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. If you have any last minute questions or requests, feel free to send them in with the super chats. I'll see you tomorrow again. We're looking at lot 37, which is by Bernhard Lederer. The piece is called Central Impulse Chronometer at lot 37. The Lederer Central Impulse Chronometer is a high-performance watch with a revolutionary escapement. Here, Bernhard Lederer unveils a one-off dial-less version in a profoundly redesigned aesthetic, exposing the movement and bringing it to life with a zest of color with Super Luminova. Very interesting. 12 and 6 are written out there on the case band between the lugs, basically. In 2020, the very discreet Bernhard Lederer was once again propelled to the forefront of watchmaking scene when he unveiled the movement of rare ingenuity, winner of the prestigious GPHG 2021 Innovation Prize. Based on the foundations first laid by Breguet, then expanded by George Daniels, it was the culmination of extensive work on the heart of the mechanical watch, its escapement. Breguet had intuited that a bidirectional détente escapement and échappement naturel, natural escapement, would inherently be more efficient. 150 years later, George Daniels took up the idea, but with an escapement that operated at the low frequency of 2 Hz, better suited to a pocket watch. The watch also had to be twisted to get the movement started, to address the dynamics of a watch worn on the wrist and ensure its reliability. Lederer first raised the frequency of his escapement to 3 Hz. More importantly, however, he sought a solution which, thanks to its geometry, would force the 2 escapement wheels to interact in such a way as to deliver optimum chronometric operation and precision under everyday conditions. Lederer's pioneer invention aligns the escapements as impulse, hence the name of the watch, Central Impulse Chronometer. .44 millimeter stainless steel case, which is treated black DLC throughout with Luminova highlights that basically include each and every color of the rainbow. I am fading a little bit, so a more in-depth discussion of Bernhard Lederer's Central Impulse Chronometer will have to wait, but this is a very particular dial-less and rainbow colored, rainbow tinted, and entirely luminous version of it for the Omni watch in a stainless steel case that is black DLC treated as well. And that is lot number 37, Bernhard Lederer, Central Impulse Chronometer, with a pre-auction estimate of 100,000 to 200,000 Swiss francs. That's it for tonight. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your support and presence. Please hit the like button if you like the show, if you learned something from it. That's a great way to support. Spread the content, spread the good word, exchange links with other collectors and enthusiasts, and help me expand the community. If you wish to contribute, I always say this, I am beholden to my audience. I am at your service, and all your contributions reflect directly in the quantity and quality of content on this channel. I have no other sponsors. I have no other interests except to expand this channel and, of course, make money off of it. So all the contributions are very much appreciated. It allows me to stay completely independent, fully autonomous, without being beholden to any interests, nefarious or not, that plague the horological industry. So if you would like to contribute, all the options are listed there, crawling in the rolling ticker. They're included as links in the video description, and they're now pinned on the chat as well. Channel memberships are now available. If you have turned to allow gifts, there are exactly 2 more gifted memberships by our own Scotch box, Ali Reza, to go around. If you sign at the initiate level, you gradually get this access to the archives of the content that I've been giving out exclusively on Patreon. At the higher level, which is $24.99, same rate as Patreon, you get concurrent access, you get day-by-day access to the markets digest that I provide there, which basically walks you through 3 different value proposition every day, with watches curated around a particular theme, selected from one brand, from one particular model, or selected as examples for one complication, picked from a specific historical era. Every time there is a coherent theme And that helps you even when you don't necessarily want to buy the watch at that point in time to learn more about that theme in a very thorough way. Um, you'll get to sample this content at that $4.99 per month membership. And if you like it more, you can also join on Patreon. In either case, an example very quickly. Yesterday, I sent my Patreon supporters 3 selections from the early work, the early designs that Daniel Roth did for the Breguet revival from 1973 to 1988, kind of like the perfect Breguet and Daniel Roth collection at the same time. Great deals, some really beautiful watches, and some um, coherent narrative about what it meant for Roth to revive Breguet in the 20th century in wristwatch form. So, in either case, that's the kind of exclusive content, that's the kind of additional content you get if you join memberships at any level or if you sign up on Patreon. Just so you know that. I'm leaving you now for tonight, but I think I'll be with you quite consistently this weekend. Um, on Monday and Tuesday, we might even have a marathon if you're interested and if you support me with your contributions and with your company on the panel. That would certainly be one option. Before I sign off, I want to say special thanks and send gratitude to Maldives for his urging for me to discuss an important issue that had come up on Instagram. You can rewind back to the beginning of the show for that, and for his generous contribution, as always, and your friend Mikey as well. Love both of you guys. And of course, my friend Ali Reza, who joined me on the panel and served, as always, as a beautiful interlocutor. Um, I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear your watches, and enjoy them. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I need to take a rest. I will see you soon. Bye.